Recording in
debrief, for
progress.
example, it also includes what the topic was, or a reference to a page number in the PowerPoint presentation, just so that it's easier to cross-reference between minutes and the actual content of the meeting.
Yeah, same comment. I think they capture the major points, but could use a little more detail. But I appreciate that they're coming to us in a timely manner. So that's half the battle.
So would it be helpful? I don't know the best way to proceed other than not to approve the minutes today, but would it be helpful for the commissioners to have a conversation about this at our next board meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'll look to you members on just how you would like to approach that. We're happy to try to get you more detailed information and go back through those again. I think one thing, again, in terms of capturing the essence of the public meeting, we are also recording this meeting, and we'll also make sure that that is available to the public as well. So there is the ability to go back and listen to verbatim in terms of everything. But if there are elements of the current meetings, the 1, 2, 3 that you're not catching, we can certainly not move on these particular minutes, and we can try to make those more, try to catch some things that are missing. It'd be nice to get a little bit more information in terms of specifics that you're looking for.
I think that a lot of the concern is not necessarily about people tracking this process right now as we're going through it, because the minutes are posted, and so are the presentations, and the video is accessible. It's next year or next cycle when we want to look back and find out what the rationale was for something, and look at the minutes and don't know quite what it relates to in terms of the presentation that was made, and how to cross-check with the video or cross-check with the presentation. So it's that linkage that we would just want to make sure we have for future reference.
Absolutely. So I would recommend holding the non-motion to move these, and then let's take this perhaps in front of the Board of Commissioners. Perhaps Lindsay and I can come in front of you. We can have a little bit further conversation about how to capture that essence a little bit more. And then we don't necessarily, I don't believe, have to move on the minutes in this particular committee. I think the Board of Commissioners can approve those minutes as a.
Or we can do them as a budget committee next time we meet.
Yeah. Okay.
But before we do leave, I guess I do have a correction on
Please.
The minutes of the last meeting. I believe that Vice Chair Nancy Wise doesn't need the word assistant in front of Vice Chair.
Okay. Got that.
That's the only thing I saw. I mean, her title's long enough as it is.
Okay.
Just taking names.
So we're moving on. We're not doing anything on the minutes, correct? I understood
That's
that.
what I would
Okay.
recommend to you.
Okay, thank you.
And Rick, would you move the mic a little
Yes.
closer here?
Yep, is that better?
Soft. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that too. Next is department presentations. First one was law enforcement.
Great. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, welcome to day 4 of this journey through the budget hearings. We, as just a kind of quick overview for today, we have the sheriff's office clearly here today. Our first presentation, we also have the district attorney with us, provide his presentation, and then finally we'll wrap up with human resources today. So that's our plan. So I was just sitting here thinking, I feel very safe right now. First, just with all of this power around me. But again, delighted to have the sheriff's office here today and be able to present their proposed budget. And so I'm going to go, as always, kick into the overview. I think the sheriff has several remarks. He may have some other people coming up at some point and joining them, and also we're deferring to Dawn a little bit. But I'll go ahead and start with just initial overview. And I'm going to borrow the sheriff's glasses. He lent those to me so I can look sort of distinguished. I forgot mine. So just as a quick overview for the sheriff's office budget, this is a $46.9 million total budget from the current service level standpoint, and that's approximately 12% above the adopted level. So as always, as I always remind you, it's When you look at from the median, what we're seeing countywide, roughly around 13.5%, this is not bad. You know, this is a efficient budget. Obviously, there's been some increases, which I would point out in our personal services is one of the things that we look at as a factor, about 16%. Again, when you compare that to what we're seeing across the county, that's a little higher. However, as part of the bargaining unit, many of the increases that were bargained there were higher than some of our other bargaining units. And then we also had some additional, such as retention pay and things that were built in that. So this doesn't surprise me in any way. This is in line with what we would expect. So overall, again, from a proposed budget standpoint, we're looking at an increase of $369,000, which ultimately brings us to roughly about a 13% cut. So, or 13% increase, excuse me, I didn't say cut. What you will hear from the sheriff and Dawn and others is they are requesting policy packages in total increase of about $1.5 million. You'll hear a little bit more about what they actually requested. But in terms of what is recommended is about a $1.5 million increase. Again, we apply a vacancy factor as we have with all of our departments. Please note, yeah, that's a $1.1 million vacancy factor, but let's keep in mind also this is a primary general funded department and it's a large department, and overall that is roughly about a 3.9% vacancy factor. So again, as I've said before, when it's less than 5, I consider that more on the lower end. And as always, and as I've talked to the sheriff as well, that we will clearly monitor that carefully. And if there are situations where we have to come back and be able to provide support to the sheriff's office, we will certainly do that. In terms of just some of the primary budget drivers, again, not going to go through all of those. I've already mentioned the bargaining unit that has a little bit more impact, I would say, in terms of the sheriff's office, just because of what we saw in the BCDSA negotiations, slightly higher, but very much needed in terms of those particular increases. Capital outlay is another area that you'll notice there is about 12%. And what I would say is related to that, there's a lot more of a need for technical equipment replacements. So you will see both from a contingency standpoint that is actually going down, but into capital outlay being increased expenses because they have a lot more replacement of equipment that they need to do. So when you look at those two line items, both the capital outlay as well as the contingency kind of goes in conjunctions. They're needing to use some of the resources that they have collected through the replacement cycle and then also be able to expend those. So that is again, moving to the category of categorical expenditures that we have. Overall, again, what you see is personal services about at 68%. That's slightly higher than 21-23 in terms of where they're using the dollars. Again, they have some positions. In total, they have about 86 FTE from a current service level standpoint. You will hear from them about 4 new FTE are being recommended in this budget. And in reality, it's 5 FTE because they do have actually a position which they are eliminating and reclassifying and reestablishing as a new. But overall, that would take them to 90 positions in total. All the other categorical areas remain relatively flat in terms of no real major change or shifts in how they're spending the dollars. Again, as I already mentioned, there is some additional needs as it relates to vehicle and equipment replacement, and that's where you see some of the differences in both our transfers and our contingencies. So moving over to the revenue sources, pretty straightforward. 72% of the dollars for the sheriff's office are specifically from the general fund. And of that amount, about 81% of it is unrestricted. They do have some dollars as it relates to operating grants, some other charges for services and various miscellaneous dollars. But you can see the majority of his discretionary money that comes from the general fund. The local option levy also is a key source. That is 22.5% to be specific. There is that money is primarily unrestricted is treated as general fund discretionary. There is some dollars that they have from the Oregon Justice Reinvestment Grant that is more specific, that is actually housed in the levy. And then the Intergovernmental Services Fund, this is a little unique. We don't see this in all of the departments. They actually have an Intergovernmental Services Fund for the replacement. So the sheriff's office manages their own replacement cycle as it relates to fleet and equipment. So these are dollars, again, they take off of their divisions budgets that are actually deposited within the Intergovernmental Service Fund. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, they use that for various equipment replacements and vehicle replacements. And then the last piece is just very small, the trust and courthouse security dollars. These are resources that are primarily dedicated for courthouse security. We have things like inmate commissary that is part of the trust fund dollars. So that's a relatively small piece. But overall, it's again pretty straightforward in terms of the revenue source, with the majority of it being the general fund local option levy. So then just before I turn it over to the sheriff, this is the breakdown, and this is as they go through their presentation, they'll speak specifically to their primary divisions, and this gives you an idea of what's changing in each of these areas. One area that I would point out, and again, I know they will touch on this, but is on the parole and probation services, where you see a decrease there. I think I know the commissioners have heard this, and we've talked a little bit of this as we move forward with our legislative agenda, is that bottom line, the community corrections money that we get from the state isn't keeping up with the cost. And I think as we go into this, and again, I failed to mention earlier in terms of the contingency reduction that we're seeing, part of that is because they're having to dip into the contingency and dollars that they need it for the actual cost. And I think overall, we're going to be okay in this biennium, but I think going forward, if things don't change as it relates to the resources that we get for parole and probations, we're going to have some problems. So I know we've mentioned this from a policy standpoint legislatively. I think it's important, and I guess I would just go ahead and say that the current service level formula for the state of Oregon probably needs to be revisited, not just for this particular county, but for all counties as it relates to supporting that. And I know the commissioners know that, but wanted to just really point out that's where you're seeing some of that. I think they've done a great job in terms of making some adjustments. I think there's a couple positions that they have agreed to not fill going into the next biennium. So that has helped to keep costs down. But at the end of the day, we are working our way through all of the resources that have traditionally been as a carryover for us. So that is something we need to continue to watch carefully. All the others in terms of the CSL and the proposed increases, again, they feel very much on track as it relates to percentage wise. The big 29% you see in emergency service, that is primarily related to a policy package that they will talk more about. And I think it's really tied to a grant in which they are applying for. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's my quick overview from the budget standpoint. I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, the sheriff here, and let him tell you a little bit more specifics.
Can you hear me all right, or do I need to speak up? I'm gonna try and not use my, I was gonna say I'm an introvert, but I'm not. So thank you for the glasses. I could have an electron microscope and I couldn't read what he has here. This is so small. I want to first point out, last Monday night, I believe it was, we had our first night. And Rick and his staff did an amazing job of laying the groundwork moving forward. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that. This is a new model and the way we're proceeding. And I think you've done an amazing job. And I would be really poor. That evening, he mentioned Dawn Dale. Dawn Dale is sitting to my left. She's the business analyst for the sheriff's office, and she's amazing. And that's why all these folks are really here, is to make sure she gets around safely. She's the one that keeps us honest. She makes sure that we don't get ourselves in any hot water, and we do have a large budget, as Rick said, and she knows it inside and out. So I am grateful to have her, and thank you. With that, I'm not a PowerPoint person. I will read this as best as I can. I've got my glasses, so when I come up and down, I lose it. So if I get lost, Dawn may interrupt, and Dawn knows she can interrupt me at any point. So with that, the sheriff's office overview. The most important thing here is our values: duty, honor, courage. And that's the expectation. If you look over on the side, you'll see that we have administration, civil process, patrol investigation, marine, animal, jail operations, parole and probation, which is community corrections, courthouse security, emergency management, special services, and special services incorporates search and rescue. Equipment replacement, the DOJ equitable sharing, adults in custody commissary. We cover a lot of things, and quite honestly, Dawn touches every one of these things. And so that just kind of explains some of the importance that she has in our office. And also point out that we've been accredited since 2009, and during the last biennium, we were reaccredited as well. Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Obviously, the sheriff's office, I was appointed sheriff in 2021. I was elected sheriff last November. And so now I'm the elected sheriff of our office. And so our office has multiple divisions. We have administration, patrol and investigations, parole and probations, correction, and emergency services. And as I said, emergency services is broken into two with emergency management, search and rescue. We have 86 regular full-time employees and 9 temporary full-time employees. And then through policy packages, we've asked for additional. We have a peer support team, a crisis intervention team. We also have access to multiple chaplains through the office. We have a drone response team, and on the patrol side, that consists of 3 deputies that are capable of flying drones. And we have 1 in search and rescue for a total of 15 drones. And that's from a large matrice, and one of the pilots is sitting behind me if I misspeak. We have a large matrice all the way down to smaller ones that we can fly inside residences. And I actually had the opportunity to fly one around the inside of the sheriff's office, and it was amazing. And the reason it's so amazing to me is the risk reduction and then the reduced liability, because now we no longer have to put deputies or canines into those high risk situations. We can put a drone in there and get a view. So I am a huge fan of the drones. We have a traffic crash team, major crimes team. We have 3 canine teams now. We have 2 patrol dogs and 1 detection dog within the office. We have regional SWAT. We participate in the Lynn Regional SWAT team. And then, of course, an animal control deputy. We have a hostage negotiation team. All concealed handgun licenses by law are applied for in the sheriff's office. And similarly, we have a permit to purchase program we're beginning, and that falls in line with ballot measure 114. And I'll touch on that a little later. We also have school resource deputies, and we participate in Shop with a Cop. So we have a Citizens Academy we completed, and that's one of our goals through the administration side. One of our goals is to complete Citizens Academies. We participate in the chili cook-off. I think this year we have 6 teams within the office that have registered. We're talking about having a Benton County Sheriff's Office only division as part of that fundraiser. We just had a drug take back event last weekend. And similarly, we also graduated a SAR Academy class, Search and Rescue Academy class last weekend. And then we rely heavily on our volunteers. We have an auxiliary team. We have the CERT team, crisis response team through Search and Rescue, reserve deputies, and then of course, Search and Rescue itself. And within Search and Rescue, there's 6 teams, and there's roughly about 150 volunteers that Kevin Higgins kind of has to herd. And it's a struggle for me to keep up with Kevin, and Kevin does an amazing job. This is the current service level. I don't need to go over it. I'll let you take a look. You have the slide or the slide presentation in front of you. But we have 86 full-time employees, and you can kind of just see where some of these fall. You will see that under patrol and investigations is the civil process. That's Dean Barnes, the civil deputy. And during the last biennium, we moved him into the patrol division. Excellent. And now, before I proceed, at the top here, it says Dawn. And so I'm going to defer to Dawn Dale for a moment so she can kind of explain these slides, because I will muck it up.
Thank you. So the next couple of slides, as we're going through the divisions, you'll see that there's 3 boxes on each of those. And so I just wanted to describe to you what those 3 boxes are. So as the sheriff is talking about each of the divisions, you can understand how each of our policy packages and current service level affected each of our divisions. So at the very top box, you'll see the FTE as current service level. Then I talk about the policy package, what was added. And so those are the ones that are recommended to come out with what our proposed total budget is for each of the divisions. The second box actually talks about our policy package. And so by each division, we've had policy packages added on there. And then I note in there what part of that policy package was recommended and what wasn't recommended. So you could kind of see. And then I thought it was really important in the third box to talk about the vacancy dollar amount, because that is $1.1 million, which seems like a lot of money. And so I wanted you to be able to see as you go through each division, how that impacted each division. So.
Any questions before we move on? And of course, she'll be here the entire time. So first, we'll start with the administration side, and in admin, obviously, we have finance and budget, contracts and grants, timekeeping, onboarding, recruitment and training. I have an accreditation and policy person. We do concealed handgun license. To be in line with ballot measure 114, one of our policy package requests is the permit to purchase personnel, community outreach, and then equipment replacement. So they provide a variety of services to the entire sheriff's office, and not just to myself or the undersheriff, but to the entire office, and then of course to the broader community. And as an example, like accreditation and policy, they oversaw our drug take back event this last weekend, and Kathy's been doing some amazing things on that in that part of the house. So their reach is much greater than just the support services hallway or our office. It's across the entire county. Do you have any questions about administration? And I could go over the boxes if you'd like. Obviously, this is where one of the policy package requests is. This is where that permit to purchase body would land, and when we get to that part. Patrol investigation and civil. And so this is this is obviously my background is in patrol. And so this is what I'm most familiar with. And if you look down the side, you'll see that we do quite a bit as far as what comes out of the side of the office. Patrol investigations, civil, marine, street crimes, forest patrol. Forest patrol is one committed full-time employee. Animal control is also a full-time employee. We have a crash team unit. The deputies are assigned to schools at the beginning of the school year. We have a warrant response team, which is kind of similar. It's the same personnel as the regional SWAT folks, but they're for local cases where maybe the criteria doesn't reach SWAT level call out, but we have folks that can respond to stuff in our community as needed. We have a forensic examiner, that's Detective Chris Dale, and he does anything computer related. He just got back from, I think it was Georgia, Alabama, for a week-long refresher training. I mean, he's way up here. He's a really smart guy. We have a major crimes team. As I mentioned, we have 3 canine teams in the office, and then the 3 drone teams attached to patrol. And then we participate in an equitable sharing program, which relates to drug forfeitures and seizures that we get through our investigations. And then I mentioned previously that civil process had come over to the patrol division. And then we also I want to give Lieutenant Toby Bodorf a bit of recognition here. He finds a lot of ODOT grants for the office, whether it be for seatbelt, speeding, following too closely, distracted driving, and anything. And he's also a DRE, he's part of the DUI program. So when he goes out and finds a lot of these grants and manages them himself through the office with Don's help. And our staff loves working on those specialized programs. Highway 20 recently has seen an uptick in a lot of traffic crashes, and just with the construction zones out there. And so I told Toby I wanted to try and do some sort of campaign. He went and found some money so that we could maybe have some overtime bodies and get folks out there. So I'm really appreciative of that. And again, it's not out of general fund. These are grant dollars. And then, of course, one of the policy packages here is we've asked two of our limited duration positions, we've asked to be converted to full-time positions, which was a recommended. And then we asked for an additional sergeant in investigations. And if you have questions about that, I have Captain Chris Duffett back here, and Chris came to the captain's position via the investigations lieutenant, so he can kind of speak to what the importance of that sergeant's position is. If you have any questions about that when we get to it, any questions about that? Yes, sir.
Yeah, you mentioned Forest Patrol, 1 FTE, and I know a year or 2 ago that there was a plan to increase that 1.5 or maybe even more. What's the plan on the Forest Patrol?
And I will defer to Under Sheriff Don Rogers.
You're correct, Commissioner. It was approved for that additional half FTE for the Forest Patrol program. And as soon as we're fully staffed, we intend to incorporate that into the schedule. So we still have a couple of openings, obviously by our vacancy rate that you can see. We're close, but as soon as that happens, we will be doing that. We have in the meantime hired back former Corporal Shermerhorn, now Reserve Deputy Shermerhorn. It's the longest step away from law enforcement I've ever seen, but he is working 2 days a week in the forest for us right now. So we're making it work, but hopefully it'll be a full-time position as soon as we're fully staffed.
Oh, to 1.5.
Correct,
Yeah.
1.5. Yeah.
Currently Jerry Williams is also assigned, so Jerry and Al are splitting time in the forest.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. You're good. So then we go to jail operations, and I will say it's a jail. It is not a correctional facility. It is a jail. And in the jail, we have a pretrial attached. This was something that came out of last biennium 2021. We now have 2 deputies, a sergeant and a deputy assigned to pretrial. They're working out of the community corrections office. We thought that was an appropriate place to house them. Community service work crew, we have 1 body attached to work crew. And then courthouse security, we contract for that. That's two personnel at the courthouse. And then maintenance, medical services, we have a nurse and then a part-time physician that comes into the facility. And then the criminal justice system, which is essentially the WCJC, our LIPSIC in the county is part of the jail as well. And then of course our commissary. And you'll see here as part of the policy package requests is we are requesting 1 position be reclassified, and that was recommended. And then 1 sergeant that will give me a full complement of sergeants on 1 on each shift within the facility. That was not recommended. Something that Captain Devaney and I worked on recently, and I say I just because I guess I'm the sheriff, really it was Captain Devaney. We switched to a thing called Guardian, or we're moving to a thing called Guardian RFID or RFID. The Norcor is a facility in the Dalles where I rent beds, and they have something similar, and it's very much like it's a cell phone, and it has all the information you need on it. And so when you have to do a 15, 30, 45 or 60-minute check on an adult in custody, and for those that we call it inmates are no longer inmates, or adults in custody. So if you have to do like a 15-minute check on an AIC, the phone will vibrate or ring or whatever your tone will set up, and then you go and there's a barcode, and you actually have to physically do the phone to the barcode, and you can make notes. You can do whatever you need to do when you check on that AIC to be in line with some of the recent legislation and rules that have come out. Now you can videotape with that device as well. You can make notes on the device, and it's all paperless. So we'll be able to, there'll be accountability both for staff and for the adults in custody. And there'll be a great trail for us if we ever had to do an investigation, or if there's ever any question, or if an AIC raising an issue, now the deputy can go, no, we did that. It's all going to be documented, everything we do. So that's a real nice benefit in the facility. And then as far as pretrial goes, we recently purchased ankle monitors for folks to get those release agreements. And we also have some ankle monitors for folks that have a no alcohol clause, and that'll be managed through the pretrial release program. Any questions about the jail? All right. And as Rick alluded to when we first started, parole and probation is kind of a unique division within the sheriff's office. And I have Captain Justin Carley here, and I've asked Justin to kind of get up and cover the parole and probation side, just because I don't want to mess up how we are funded and where it comes from. He is the subject matter expert. So I will be. I sure can.
In your glasses. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. 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 So again, my name is Justin Carley, and I'm captain with the Sheriff's Office and oversee the parole and probation office. And just to give a little bit of historical context, where we are in the legislative session is kind of in a wait and see period for the statewide funding for community corrections. And I always try to do my best to understand what scene I am in the movie. And right now, The most recent scene was that we took a population forecast the Department of Corrections does, the Community Corrections Division of the DOC takes a population forecast. And statewide, they've just continued to see a decrease in the overall population of supervised individuals across the state. And that impacted the most recent overall community corrections dollar. Our current allocation has been officially given to us by the Department of Corrections, and we will be 1.22% allocation of whatever this final number will be. And so, yeah, Sheriff, I don't know how much deeper into the weeds I need to get into this, but it is currently in a wait and see position right now. And then once that number is finally given out by the Department of Corrections, the Community Corrections Division, I will be back here before the commissioners presenting the Community Corrections Plan that will have a full budget description of our programs and some other information in there as well. You have a question? Sure.
Supervised individuals, who does that cover?
So the snapshot that is taken is folks that are on felony supervision in the state of Oregon. So those are the funded cases in the state of Oregon. There is a funding stream for a certain type of misdemeanor crime, but that ended up to be a policy package at the end of the last biennium. And so I'm interested to see what type of policy packages may come to the end of this legislative session in terms of the impact on the community corrections budget.
And there hasn't been a comprehensive effort to redo the current service level formula yet, although there was a work group, right?
So I do believe that there was a work group. We were having this conversation internally not long ago that the news about community corrections and it had been, we thought, trending in a very positive way. And then it was this most recent snapshot. The snapshots are taken in October and April. In this last April, the snapshot in April is the final snapshot that gives the last numbers for the budget. And it just was a decrease in the local control population and a decrease in the post-prison supervision population that was unanticipated, as was explained to me by the DOC.
And they don't average over multiple population forecasts.
Yes. Yeah, the sustainability of community corrections funding is,
Problematic.
yes.
Commissioner Moore.
Yeah, Captain Carly, question.
Mhm.
I know at times we release people that we would really like to hold.
Mhm.
What kind of budget impacts? I mean, there's a cost, but would we also get more community corrections funds or other funds to balance that out?
So are you talking about local releases or releases from the Department of Corrections?
Local.
So I'm not sure that the community corrections dollars would be impacted directly from some of our local releases from our county jail.
But if we were holding those folks that we would like to hold but don't have space, I'm just trying to get some notion what that would do to the budget.
I'm not sure what the direct impact on the budget would be. I do know that in terms of folks being held locally on, for example, a sanction that a parole and probation officer would do, because of our jail space issues that we've just had to become extremely creative in our sanctioning practices and kind of resourcefulness in how to hold folks accountable. But I'm not sure, I'd have to do a little bit of a deeper dive to see what type of impact it would have directly on the community corrections budget. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? No? Yep. I'm sorry.
I guess I do have a follow-up question on Commissioner Malone's question, and that is, if community corrections imposes a sanction on an adult under supervision and they end up in the jail for a day or three, does not come out of, the expense doesn't come out of your budget, it's just part of the jail expenses, correct? Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
okay. So, thank you.
So.
Okay. Emergency services. This has two major areas of responsibility and to plan and direct emergency procedures that help protect citizens from natural and human caused disasters and to search for and provide aid to people who are missing, lost, injured, or in imminent danger. So what that means is I have emergency management and I have search and rescue. And under emergency management, you have Emergency Operations Center or the EOC, a disaster preparedness, information resources and planning, emergency alert, and CERT. And I'm going to tell you, this is very clearly, Brian didn't do this because he'd have a list that you can't imagine, because he does have a large area of responsibility. And then under special services, we have search and rescue. And as I mentioned, we have multiple teams that fall under the search and rescue guys. And then drones, I mentioned I had an additional drone. I have a search and rescue pilot in Kevin. And so he flies drones for the search and rescue side. And then he also does, his office does our communications portion of our social media outreach comes from his office. And then he also manages a crisis response team. You'll see here that we are asking for 1 FTE, which is grant funded, and I'll touch on that a little bit later, as well as some Swiftwater and search and rescue training, which I'll touch on here a little bit later as well. And then we can touch on our goals kind of quickly here, because I did tell the DA that I would try and give him some time. And so I don't want to go back on that. Goal number 1 is to have the capacity to respond to 18,000 calls for service per year, which includes self-initiated and dispatch calls. I want to be able to do that without incurring a bunch of overtime. I think that's appropriate and fiscally responsible. And so we're just about there. Like the undersheriff said, we have 2 openings. I think we have a job offer out. And we have interviews coming up next month for the final position. I don't feel like I need to read that entire slide. I think you have the presentation in front of you. Oh my. John's microphone is too heavy. It's going to break. Oh no, I think we're good. All right. Goal number 2 is for Search and Rescue Academy. We just held the SAR Academy last week. Huge success. Kevin did a great job. The undersheriff went up and cooked dinner. I had the opportunity to go up and cook breakfast. They stay out overnight. They have to stay awake all night. They have to build a fire, and the fire simulates their patient or the person they're in charge of. And it was raining, as you recall. And so it was a miserable night for the search and rescue folks. And they got up in the morning and they were amazing. They were just amazing. I would ask you, if you recall last year, we had the same academy, and then Monday morning we were called out to a search and rescue that lasted all week. And our new volunteers were there and they were amazing. Again, Kevin was a scene commander and he did great. And so this Search and Rescue Academy is vitally important to the success of the overall program. And to give Kevin a little bit more credit, Polk County is now going to get more involved with our search and rescue as well and participate in our academy. So well done for Kevin. This one here, Jen is really pleased with this. Jen was in the office earlier today trying to convince me we needed a compost bin as well within the office. We're working on that. But this is to purchase 2 hybrid vehicles for the sheriff's office this calendar year. Under Sheriff Rogers is working on that. And so I don't need to get into it, but obviously we do want to participate in the climate initiatives that the Board of Commissioners have made a priority. And so we'll start working towards that. I did have a conversation as well with Jen, just about some of the prohibitions for electric cars for the deputies, simply because there's a lot of weight. And so we just need to make sure that they're able to accommodate all the gear and equipment that go into a typical patrol vehicle. Goal number 4 is to host a Citizens Academy in 04. We did one, or 2024, we did one last year with our new accreditation manager and Sarah Jane, one of our volunteers. And it was a success. It was awesome. I gotta tell you, the academy was cool. So I'm looking forward to doing that again. And then lastly, present a wildfire preparedness social media campaign to prepare residents for the wildfire season in 2024, reaching 18,000 people across all channels by 2024. Our social media outreach is about 20,000 plus. And so I'm really excited for Brian to put this campaign together and work with our PIOs and our social media team to get this done as well. While we're really here. The policy package request summaries. So we've requested or recommended, I shouldn't say we, the CFO, I sometimes confuse myself with Rick, I apologize. 369,409 recommended increase with 4 FTE. And I can get into reading these, but what I really want to get into is the next page, and we'll just go over the packages. So package number 1 is what we discussed before, the permit to purchase employee, and that falls in line with ballot measure 114. There's currently a backlog. They're forecasting at 300,000 to 400,000 people will be applying for these permits. The undersheriff supervises our CHL program. And we were talking earlier today with the CHL person who does those things. And it was like 1,200 permits last year. And what she said, there's 4,000, 5,000 in Benton County CHL holders. And every 4 years, 5 years, 4 years, they have to renew. And so we have brought on somebody that was a reserve within the program, reserve Marine deputy and limited duration in the jail to help get the CHL caught up. At the undersheriff's direction, they did some Friday, they cleared the schedule and just had people come in and get their CHLs renewed. We're trying to get that time waiting for a CHL cut down because when this ballot measure 114 goes into effect, I don't want the hiccup to be Benton County. And so what I'm looking for is a full-time employee to pick up that load and that workload. And it's been recommended, but it's a limited duration position. We want to constantly take a look at it, make sure that it is what we need for that program. If it's going to wane off, we don't know. And so it's a limited duration request, or I guess that was the recommendation, was limited duration. Anything to add?
Actually was for a full-time employee, but we're willing to assess the program over the next 2 years to see if it really does need to be a full-time employee. The estimate for Benton County is 10% of the population will want a permit to purchase. So that's 10,000. Again, our CHL is a full-time employee. She did a little over 1,000 last year. Her biggest year was 1,200. So if you think that's 10 times for the first year and then renewal every 4 years after that for if measure 114 goes into effect. So we want to be prepared, but we're willing to do it for a limited duration and make sure that that's what it needs to be.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Did the ballot measure provide for local organizations to charge?
We can charge for the process, but it had a cap at the time. It's I think it's $65.
The actual cost.
Right. So it's capped, but the Oregon State Police costs are going to outweigh what it's capped at already. So that's kind of where we have a problem.
Move that mic away from him because he's getting feedback. Thank you.
A little feedback's okay. And I didn't used to wear my glasses like this until I hung out with the undersheriff.
There is legislation pending in the legislature to change and update some of the specifications around the Measure 114 program. And I think that would actually raise the dollar amount that could be charged.
So Measure 114, they had multiple, good night. They had multiple things on the table in the legislature. They combined them into one current ballot or one current Senate bill. And then Harney County, it's in a stay in Harney County. And then it also has been stayed at the federal level in Pendleton. So there's a whole lot of things working. For me personally, I just want to make sure that the county is not the hiccup for folks who want to purchase, whether you're a survivor, a victim, a lawful gun owner, whatever it might be. I want to make sure folks are able to go through the process quickly on our end. Okay, number two. This is a salary compensation package. So my office houses the Benton County Sheriff's Deputy Association, BCDSA. They received we did a 5-year contract, and I can't take any credit for it. The undersheriff worked on those negotiations and did amazing work. So they have a 5-year contract, but what that did do is created a great deal of compression between the deputies and the sergeants, and then the sergeants to the lieutenants and so on. And so initially I had proposed that I requested 10% across the board for sergeants, lieutenants, captains, and the undersheriff. That was immediately shot down. That was going to be about $656,000. And that's I recognize that was a big ask. So we went back to the drawing board and we came up with a 10-8-6-4-2, so that there would always be a 10% gap between the top paid deputy and the lowest paid sergeant. And then there would always be 8% between that top paid sergeant and the lowest paid deputy, and so on up the ladder. And that came out to $124,738 versus the 656. And if we implement that, then we don't find ourselves in this position any longer, as long as that pay is always 10% between that top deputy step C and the lowest paid sergeant. And I'll turn it over to Dawn. She's got a handout in here that really explains it much better than I can. One
more.
There we go.
Okay, so what I did is when the sheriff had come to me and had let me know as to what his intentions were and wanting to go with this 10-8-6-4-2 model, I went out and actually looked at where everybody was. I went and looked at what they would be earning as of 7/1/23. And so as you can see by my chart up there, you'll see on column B, I have it where it starts with the deputy C, goes down to a sergeant, lieutenant, captain, undersheriff, and sheriff. And then under column V, you will see what the rate is. Their annual rate is going to be as of 7/1/23. So I took into account the 4% that the deputies will be getting through the union. And then I looked to see on the other ranks, what folks would be getting either a 3 or 4% at that time. So it's really easy when you look at this chart to be able to look and see how much difference it is between the ranks. And so just to give you an example, where you see deputy C position and then you go to the sergeant, and then if you look in column Y, you'll see that there's only a 0.29% difference between a deputy C and a sergeant. Well, that's not okay. And so with the model that we're asking you guys to approve is between a deputy C and sergeant, that there at least be a 10% span. And as you can see, this affects 6 of our sergeants. And at a 10%, that you will see under column AA, they should be making $103,854.48. And so then under AB, I show what that difference is. So with this model, we would be asking that as of July 1, that we could bring this group that's in the yellow up to the appropriate amount that they should be making. You'll see that exact same thing when we go from a sergeant to lieutenant. We have one of the lieutenants that is making less than that 8% span between a sergeant and lieutenant. You'll also see that under the captain, where you'll see there are 2 of them where we're asking for a 6% span between the lieutenant and captain. And then you'll see the same thing with the sheriff and undersheriff. And with this model, this would solve our compression issue going forward. We would ask that this model be in place so that as somebody is moving up between the ranks, that we would look at where the current wage is for folks that are below or at the highest and lowest, so that we would always maintain that. The other time we would look at it would be when July 1 came around, and the deputies, no matter what they contracted out, and at this point, they're contracted out at 4% for the next 4 years. And so if we have our non-reps who are getting 3%, you can easily see where all of a sudden we're coming up with that issue again. And so the idea is that we have where we're solving the compression issue, and we're not continuing to talk about it because the entire time I've been in the sheriff's office for the 7 years, and even the 5 years I was working in finance, this has always been a problem. And so the idea that we could put a model in place that would solve this problem going forward and we'd never have to talk about it again is a win-win for everybody. It also is encouragement for our staff when they're moving among the ranks. There seems like there's a perk there, you know? And so I know we have had difficulty in moving people through the ranks because they look at this and they're like, if you're only going to get 0.29%, but you're responsible for these people underneath of you and all these other responsibilities, it doesn't quite seem worth it. So we would hope that you would adopt this. This was something that we said, after we knew we weren't recommended, we went back to Rick. And so he suggested that we present it to you guys because now it is a little lower package. And so I would hope that you guys would help us to solve this compression issue for once and for all.
I would cede to CFO Krager first, and then I'll follow.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I just wanted to, as the sheriff had indicated, I won't use the word shot down. I want to make sure that I represent in terms of the review of this particular package. I think in the conversations that we had, clearly it's, as we've all talked, it's always a balance, but in this particular package, there is recognition that this has to be addressed. This is an issue, and there is no doubt that we need to work through what that looks like. I do appreciate the additional work that Dawn and staff have done, and I think, it's definitely a model that we can certainly look at. Our recommendation was, though, at the same time, we are, and Tracy will be here a little bit later and she could speak to this, but at the same time, there is a management non-representation review that's been going on, a market study. And our thinking was to try to tie that into the entire package so that we could look at this holistically as a county. Now, again, recognition, though, the law enforcement does have a compression issue and that we have to be able to respond to that. But the thinking is to do it all at once. Now, I know that certainly the sheriff is anxious, and I agree that we want to try to address this as soon as possible. So we have to make sure that we get through that process, but we could always look from a retroactive standpoint.
I would like to say that, like Dawn, this has been a problem ever since I've been with the county, and it really does inhibit our ability to promote people from within. And the issue of doing a salary study has been used every time the sheriff's office comes up with some sort of a proposal for a solution, and it never seems to get resolved. So I really like this model because of the fact that it is triggered automatically. My only question is whether or not it's workable for HR. It probably would require some, separate and parallel processes to implement it just for the a subset of our employees. And I can understand that might have some associated expense for them. But I do believe that this is something that is a good idea, and I appreciate the fact that it's an affordable approach.
Commissioner Wise, then Commissioner Moore.
I think he's okay. Couple questions. How did you come up with the 10-8-6-4-2 model? How did you land on those numbers?
We basically sat down and talked about if the 10% was unacceptable and how can we make this equitable across the board. And again, at the end there says 2% for me. I said 1%, and they're like, no, we're gonna do it this way. And it was kind of a group thing. It wasn't just I sat down and said, this is what we're gonna do. We sat down and said, okay, how can we better this? And I do want to apologize to Rick. When I say shot down, that's my verbiage. He graciously said, come back at me with something else, maybe. And so we reworked that. I said shot down. I apologize.
I think Commissioner really was, okay, how do we make it affordable? And how do we make this a permanent fix for the sheriff's office? Obviously, some agencies do it different ways. Some agencies have that 10 per rank. We were told that's not affordable. So we figured, how do we make it work?
And some organizations use the Me Too language. So whatever the union gets, the entire organization gets. And clearly that wasn't workable either. And so we just felt like this was the most equitable way to make sure that parity existed and we don't have that compression any longer.
Thank you. And this might be a better question for HR. I don't know if you know, but how often do we anticipate triggering these automatic adjustments? Is it yearly? More?
So there would be 2 times that we would do it. We would do it on July 1st, when the deputies would get theirs, and that would trigger to be able to look at that and make sure that we keep that percentage in between. And the other time would be when we would promote somebody. So at any point in time that we promoted somebody, we would look at whatever their starting would be, because right now it would be 5%. But that hasn't always worked out because we actually have 3 that were just recently promoted and they end up being on the yellow in this list. So we would look at that and make sure that they are at least making that percentage higher. And so those would be the 2 times we would have to look at it to keep this model going and to keep that percentage in between the ranks.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around like the long term, if people start bumping up and then that bumps someone up, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand it completely. And I do support this. Thank you.
Commissioner Malone?
Yeah, I guess my question is, how does the study fit into? So the study would be wider ranging than what we're just talking about here as far as effect.
So obviously, as Commissioner Ojiro mentioned, I mean, we want to, would that be, it sounds like that's been something that's been used before. I don't want to speak to that. That was before my time, but I think in talking to Tracy, what we want to do is be able to look at all of management across the county. And are there other situations within the county where compression may be an issue? But in terms of building this, being able to perhaps this model or some other model, be able to kind of wrap it all in. Commissioner Ojiro, I think you said it better than I, that it may not be the management study, but it's also the practices. How does HR put this in place? Because this is something that HR has to manage going forward. I would also add to this is something I have to manage from a budgetary standpoint. So how do I plan for this? How do I understand, and how is that built into the scale? So again, I think this is a good representation, but there is some work that's going to need to be done by probably other people to come in and analyze this carefully to make sure it's done well.
As I understand it, there is compression in other departments for sure, but it's been the most acute in law enforcement. And not only that, but given the nature of and structure of the organization and the clear responsibility that you have when you bump up in rank, it just doesn't make sense to be making 0.29% more pay than the folks that you are responsible for. It's a real disincentive. And in most of the other departments, there's not that kind of life and death potential impact of these kinds of decisions, and creating a bottleneck in terms of promotions is horrible for morale.
Chair, I was just going to mention that I saw Tracy Martineau, our HR director, pop on. I didn't know if she wanted to say something.
Oh, brutal.
Any other questions?
She was just asking if Tracy wanted to say a word.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I've got 3 screens open, so if it looks a little weird on your screen, I apologize for that. I just wanted to say that this appears that this is beyond budgeting and finance, that this also impacts policy as it is currently written for the organization. So just wanted to highlight that. It's clear Dawn put a lot of work into this, and I respect the work that she did. I know she does great accounting work and financial work. Unfortunately, this is the first time that I've seen this, and I don't think our compensation analyst was involved in putting this together either. So there's a lot to digest. A couple of quick hits are that there are traditional and accepted practices to establishing salary ranges in compensation methodology. And typically there is a mathematical relationship between salary ranges. It is not uncommon for salary ranges between a superior and a subordinate to overlap to some extent. We are bringing in a compensation consultant to meet with the board here in the near future, and maybe some of these questions can get addressed and some of these details can get explained so that it's a little more clear. So I would just offer that up.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think that this will be an issue for discussion. And I think that we just need to understand the intent of the Budget Commission and the fact that it may not be a clear outcome as a result of the way the budget is approved. But we can have budget notes, right?
I like that.
All I can do is ask.
Oh, of course.
All right, so if there's no more questions, do you have any questions? Are we good? Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, I can feel the DA looking at the back of my head, so I have to hustle up. Ballistic vests is policy package number 3, which has been recommended. This is outside of the current vests that we wear. This is actually for my warrant response team in the community, in the county. And so these are replaced. They're on a 5-year replacement cycle, and it's time to replace those. And that money has been recommended as well.
And if I might just jump in terms of this recommendation, so this came through the sheriff's office. What we did in looking at, because it was a relatively small purchase, we shifted this to what we call the non-departmental budget. So you'll hear this on the last day that we present. So it certainly is getting acquired and is approved, but we'll just do it in another budget where there was some available resources.
And then policy package. Oh,
Quick question, Chair, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Were these the same vests that were in our last CIP projected to be on the 23, this CIP?
No, so these are actually different than the vests they wear every day. So we run those through actually a grant. And so we get 50%, but that grant will only pay for one. And so this isn't the normal vest that they wear every day. It's part of the warrant response team. So this is above and beyond and not included in those.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then policy package number 4. So the request will provide 3 full-time employees in patrol and investigation and 2 full-time employees in the abolishment of 1 full-time employee in corrections and the abolishment of existing 1 full-time employee to maintain proper staffing levels to help alleviate monetary and personnel burden. And it might be best if I have Dawn explain this, because I promise you this is another one I may mess up.
Dawn or Dawn?
Oh, I'm sorry, Dawn Dale.
Sorry, we have this problem in our office a lot. It's like, which Dawn? Okay, so this is for, so this is for 3 FTE in patrol, and I think we talked about that when we were going through patrol. 2 of them, of the positions, are actually for the limited duration and making those irregular, and those were approved. But there was 1 position in patrol and 1 position in the jail that were for sergeants that was not recommended. And so I think you were.
And then I have the captains of each division here that can kind of explain the necessity in their own words of why they need those sergeants position. And so Sergeant Dale or Sergeant Dale, Sergeant Devaney and Sergeant Duffett or Captain Devaney and Captain Duffett are behind me. Geesh, I'm getting tired. I've been talking a long time. And so if you guys would like to take the floor for a moment and just explain what the importance of the sergeant. I'll give you the microphone. We'll start with you.
Okay, so right now we have 6 shifts at the jail. The one upgrade that was approved, moving a deputy up to a sergeant, would put a 5th sergeant on, so we'd have 5 of this 6 shifts covered, but we have a weekend day shift that does not have a sergeant on. I was just at a jail commanders conference. I spoke to Sheila Lawrence, that's from our CIS rep for corrections risk management, corrections risk management, and she indicated that a promoted supervisor on each shift does lower the liability. It helps increase morale. If an issue comes up and we have, major incidents in the jail and you don't have a promoted supervisor on shift and somebody has to come in from the road that's not specifically corrections. It does lead to opening us up a little bit more for liability issues. That's the big reason for wanting to have one on each shift. And as agencies grow, at some point it gets to the point where they say they want a watch commander, which would be a lieutenant on each shift. We're not there, but having a sergeant, a promoted supervisor on every shift would definitely lower our risk and provide that guidance for the newer folks that we're hiring on, because they're especially going to be the weekends, the nights, those types of shifts. And it's always good to have somebody with a little bit more seniority and some training and supervision skills to be able to oversee that.
All right, and I could echo some of the same things that Captain Devaney said about the need for a sergeant on each shift, and how I would see our detective division as a division within the patrol division of the sheriff's office. Currently, we have a lieutenant who's in charge of the detective division, but he also has a lot of other responsibilities that he's also in charge of. We have Detective Dale, which is the computer forensics examiner. We have Detective Horn, who's also a child abuse and sexual abuse investigator. It's a person crime assignment. We have 2 new detectives coming on, and they're going to focus on kind of a mix of those things to include property crimes and drug crimes and major crimes. Just a couple little things real quick. The call load and the volume of our detective division isn't getting any smaller. It's in fact getting bigger. And there's many reasons for that. Just in the last 6 months, they've been involved in 6 fatal crash investigations. Our fatal crashes are up 200% at this point, and actually our aggravated assault cases are up about 41%. Our detective division is also in charge of doing kind of outside investigation requests, and also the lieutenant would be responsible for doing internal investigations that would come from any citizen complaints and have that additional workload. So what the sergeant would do for our detective division would open up the ability for the detectives to actually be able to focus on their cases. It would create a detective sergeant position that would be a line level supervisor that would be able to supervise that division effectively. And then it would open up the lieutenant to not have to take the cases, which currently he's doing, and allow him to be responsible for that division. And there's also the many other responsibilities that he has as a lieutenant. Realistically, we could ask for several more detectives and maybe even 2 detective sergeants to be in this position. And that wouldn't be an unreasonable number to take on the caseload that they're currently working, and to minimize that backlog and to help them be more proactive in their investigations, as opposed to only being reactive for the cases that we're getting from the community. And that would, there's just a gap there. And with that one detective sergeant position outside of the many that there could be, I think that's kind of where we need to stand. And really, we don't just want this. I think we owe it to the community to have this position to be able to focus on these proactive investigations for the future.
So this also, it says up here about helping to alleviate monetary and personnel burden. So basically, this would unburden our staff a little bit and reduce some of the need for overtime. Is that correct?
I would say that, and I might not be the one to actually answer this question, but knowing from large experience in our detective division, is that it's one of the most overtime intensive areas within the sheriff's office. It's not uncommon for us to get called out, or the detectives to get called out and be, putting in over 2 days, 48 hours of overtime just in a weekend. And that's not realistic moving forward with budgetary concerns. And it would kind of open up and have more positions to be able to cover those and not have to pull in people from, going home at midnight for this case and then coming back in at 2 a.m. for the next case that they're called in for.
And I can speak a little bit to the budget part. We did have, with the current service level, And the way we did the budget this time, it was based on actuals and budget. And so, every year when we're looking at budget, those factors actually affect our budget one way or another. So I'm constantly looking at when we do have a case that is taking a lot more overtime than would normal, I have to constantly be looking at where can I shift the money, because we have to come up with it. And so with the current service level, things were based on what kind of happened in the last year. And we really didn't have costs that affected it. So we're kind of going into it with a little lower cost than current service level to pay for this. So by having that additional sergeant that helps take some of that load off, it will also help us going forward to stay within budget in those lines for current service level. So
Seems more predictable than overtime, which is expensive.
correct.
And additionally, in the jail, we pay deputy on the weekends acting in capacity pay. And obviously, if there's a sergeant there, we don't have to make that, we don't have to pay that additional 5%.
Any other questions? Ms. Irish?
Is it a safety issue having work as much overtime as they're working?
I would say yes. Yes, it is. We ask a lot of our staff and they respond without question. But we ask a lot of our folks. And I can tell you in the last year plus, we've brought on 8 new deputies and we still have 2 openings. We're in the process of getting the positions filled. But in the meantime, we ask a lot of our staff and they're compensated for it, but the money, in my opinion, doesn't make up for what we ask of them. They respond to every single thing and they don't question it.
Well, when I hear 48 hours of overtime over a weekend, that indicates people are pretty much working nonstop, double shifts, back to back.
That can happen.
You're in a high risk activity. I would think that that would just exasperate the situation. I mean,
Correct.
above the overtime pay and the money involved, it seems like that would be a safety issue.
And this position will help alleviate some of that for investigations. I can tell you that Captain Duffett just came from the lieutenant position in investigations. And when I make his phone ring, he answers as well. And when it's all hands on deck, the undersheriff, myself, we all go to work. And that's kind of just been the expectation. And I wish I could tell you it's different than any place I've ever worked, but it's not. That's just what cops do.
Is there a burnout issue?
I would say there is, but I will also say that it's 2023 and we do a much better job of getting in front of it. So like I mentioned earlier, we have peer support, we have crisis response, we have chaplains. And so we have access to resources to help folks that we see that. And that's one of the responsibilities of the captains and the undersheriff and myself is to recognize that and make sure we get folks in front of those resources and do take care of our folks.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? No. Okay, moving on.
Very good. I apologize, John, I'm hustling. Hazard mitigation requests. So this is policy package 5. This is actually a grant funded position that emergency management has applied for. And we don't know what the status of the grant is. There's a match of $94,000 that's part of the ask. But until we know whether or not we're going to get the grant for the position, we don't know what that's going to look like. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Who is the grant coming from?
Well, fortunately, Brian Lee is here and he can answer any of your questions.
So the grant's coming from the state fire marshal.
Yeah.
They keep needing money.
People online.
The grant is coming from the Oregon State Fire Marshal. It's actually a relatively new grant following Senate Bill 762 and the 2020 Labor Day fires. The funding is good for a short period of time. They don't know if it's going to be repeated after the grant cycle that's being offered. It is a competitive grant, so that's why we don't know the status yet. It was supposed to be finished in March. However, they received so many grant applications that they said, hopefully by the end of April, we should have more. And this position was a request based on previous discussions actually in 2021 regarding mitigation projects and prioritization of funding to the community. And then the discussions were in October of 2022 and additional ones following that. And this is that leveraging that all disasters begin in locally, and every dollar invested in mitigation saves over $7 or $8 in response. So this position and is actually a package. It includes one position and then public education, vegetation mitigation projects. And then there was one other, evacuation planning. So they would be, it's a combined package itself.
Okay, that sounds very attractive. And when you say end of April, that's tomorrow. So maybe we'll hear soon. I'm thinking Oregon Department of Forestry has also I forget what the position is called, do the Firewise, and hopefully there would be coordination between your office's efforts and ODF, and because it seems like there's a fair amount of overlap.
Yeah, absolutely. If this position was filled, there'd be interfacing not only with them, but the rural fire district specifically. That's really where the gap is.
Thank you.
I just wanted to point out that when I've been out in the community, people understand the need for this position. We have our new community wildfire protection plan with a lot of projects lined out, but the fact that there's no one to help do that coordination and make sure that we can receive grants, we can go for grants, and we can actually implement them it is a real missing piece. And yes, the rural fire districts were part of that audience that were asking for this.
Mr. Chairman, I might just put on the record this, but Mr. Lee was pointing out, and we did not in our recommendation put this as a limited duration position. This was as a permanent. So I just would note that for the record, based on his comments in terms of this maybe being short-term funding, that might be something to consider, because I think at times we see grants are awarded and then the grant potentially goes away, and then what replaces that resource. So again, that's just for your consideration, I would put out there.
So I just want to note that this is a 3-year grant. So if we did as a limit duration, we may have an issue with that position, because we did put in the grant that we would fund the position for the 3 years of the grant. So just FYI.
We would just have to include it in the next biennial budget.
Well, and I guess my other comment is I'm always happy to see Brian Lee's office getting a little more depth, Brian. I've been impressed with your efforts, and I know you try to do everything, but I don't think that's always possible. So I really hope we're successful on this one.
I would add Commissioner that the undersheriff and I tell Brian that all the time.
Good.
Moving on.
All right, and our last policy package request is the Swiftwater Rescue Plan. And that provides for training for 6 volunteers and 6 paid staff to attend Swiftwater Rescue Training Course. And this is from non-departmental budget, and it's also been recommended. We have no questions. We'll kind of just summarize it real quick here. But basically package number 2 is a management salary compression issue. And that's what we discussed briefly. It went from 656 to 124. You heard from HR Director Martineau as well as CFO Krager. So I don't need to touch on that any longer. And then the increased capacity for the patrol and jail. You heard from the 2 captains and what the benefit is not only to the office, but to the community. So future challenges and opportunities. Command pay structure issue we discussed. Our aging transition building and the transition program. That's currently a capital improvement request to provide some long overdue updating to the facility. That's through community corrections. And then inadequate and failing jail. I think we've covered that for about 50 years. And then the parole and probation, which is just the anticipated reduction in monies and revenue from the state that will affect the beginning balance in the next biennium and beyond. And then just some opportunities. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention about measure 2140 and the fact that we do have an opportunity to improve the overall justice system. And then with that would be a co-located sheriff's office and emergency operations center, a new correctional facility, no longer a jail, but a correctional facility. and with 120 beds to better serve our community and the AICs. And I just want to say thank you. This is the first time we've done this in person for me, and having my entire office here has been awesome. And so we're here for your questions now. And if I recall, I believe Miss Irish had several questions. Any questions? Miss Irish.
I want to ask one just in general, because I haven't tracked how this has gone. Measure 112. How has that affected the community service workout groups that passed last year? Was the anti-slavery bill that the sheriff's office spoke about maybe affecting work crews? How has that? Has anything happened with that? Where are we at on that?
I can answer that, but I do want to have Captain Devaney address that.
Basically. Basically, we addressed our, the AIC workers that we have in the jail. We worked out with County Council Prony to change the language on it and made sure that they understand it's voluntary work, that they can quit at any time without any type of repercussions. And he felt that that met the standard under 112. We then had a meeting with all the judges about the work crew and were they still planning on doing it? And they said they were. They didn't see that they thought it was more for prison inmates as compared to the local people as an alternative to going to jail, which is what our work crew is. And it also helps them to pay off fines. So we met with all three of the circuit court judges and they all agreed that that was something they were still going to do. And I think we just were talking about it we just assigned a new person to work crew. We have 166 people that have work crew hours to work off. So it should be a continued program for a bit.
Is that a source of revenue for the county, the work crews, or is that just like picking up garbage on the side of the road? How does that work exactly?
Actually, probably the best person to answer that would be Dawn, as she's overseas. She wants us to be revenue neutral. And we're working on that.
So that's in a self-balancing cost center. So actually the revenue we get for that actually just covers the expenditures. So yeah, it's not a revenue source for us. It's just a service to the community.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. And then my next question is, how many community volunteers do you have on the search and rescue currently?
We have about 150 in the 6 different teams, 6 different teams.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And I just want to make a comment because I grew up in Grants Pass, in a place that didn't ever pass levies and ran out of jails and sheriff's officers. I appreciate that you guys are still on the road, and I would encourage all of us to consider funding the sheriff's office. Not that that is a problem here, but I think it's something people don't talk about a lot between the jails and the lack of deputies on the road in Southern Oregon. It affected the entire state. And so I just want to say it's a good thing to fund the sheriff's office.
I think you got a new recruit. Commissioner Moore.
Yeah, Sheriff, I really appreciate you bringing your whole team. One, to help you answer questions, but also to show us, kind of put faces to positions and get a little more insight into who does what. So that's helpful for me, and we'll give you an easy one as we're tapering out here. You use the term technical equipment, and I don't think it was, maybe just for the record, what you're talking about. I'm guessing that means vests, but what other type of equipment would qualify under that?
So I guess under technical equipment, perhaps you're talking about radios, our GTACs, which are our computers, body worn cameras, the in-car cameras. We just had to replace all of our tasers. And it's changed a lot since I first started. And when the undershow, we didn't have cell phones. When I was been here for a little bit, we got a pager. And those are relics, and we didn't have cameras, and I had a VCR, and you had to keep your VCR tape. I mean, technology is amazing, but with technology comes an increased cost. And Axon, who has tasers, who has the in-car cameras, who has the body cameras, who manages it on the cloud, they continue to make money. And every time they want to make a dime, they upgrade something or they require you to do something different. And to stay technically relevant, we have to participate in those upgrades. And so we just did significant upgrades with our radios, with our camera systems. I mean, you name it, we have to do that to stay relevant and up to date.
Great, thank you.
Nothing else? No.
Closing statements.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I want to, for the record, the DA gets 4 extra minutes.
So does the board want a 4-minute break or yes? Okay. 4 minute
Five.
break. 5.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Your mic is.
Closer.
No, it's not on the back. Is it?
Up and spin it around and do a dance. That works.
It's on now.
It's on now. Okay, good. Thank you. So moving on to the district attorney's office, very thankful to have Mr. Haroldson, DA Haroldson here, along with the staff, Renee Hamel, to help with the presentation overview of the district attorney's office. So as always, I'm just going to jump in real quickly and then get out of the way for the district attorney. So in terms of overview, I just realized I don't have the sheriff's glasses anymore. So just in terms of overview, that's okay. Thank you. I'm looking. All right, that's better. Like the glasses there. So real quickly, the current service level budget for the district attorney's office is at $10.4 million. This is about 11% above 21-23. So again, from my standpoint, this is a little lower than what we've seen from an average standpoint. So district attorney's done a great job in terms of staying within budget. This, as with all budgets, is applying a vacancy factor. I do want to mention the 8.9%, 684,000 has a relatively higher vacancy factor. I think, the district attorney could speak a little bit more to it and better than I, but, we have seen some high vacancies in the district attorney's office over the years. And I know he's had made a lot of corrections in terms of making sure that stays down. I think we've seen upward around 16%. In some cases. So as I've told you, with all the departments we're looking at, we don't want to put anybody in a severe situation. So with the district attorney's office, I did give that a haircut in terms of bringing it down, because it wouldn't have been appropriate to put it at the six-year average, because I believe that would be way too high. But again, I know he could probably speak much better than I to that particular issue. This is a current service level budget, as I like to call it. He is not asking for any policy packages within this budget. So everything we speak to here is current service level as well as proposed. Again, primary budget drivers, you can see when you look categorically, you see a current service level growth in personal services about 13%. That's a little below what the average is across the county. Materials and supplies very solid at 8% in terms of that particular area. Capital outlay does have a 73% reduction. There was some reduced level of equipment needs. I think it was, I want to believe, and Renee could speak better if I get this wrong, but it looked like there was a one-time some capital expenditures that were occurred. It was a relatively small amount. You can imagine small amount to 73%. It adds up pretty quick when you're going from 36,000 to 10. So, and then finally, as it relates to the contingency, there is some growth that you see there. They do have dollars as it relates to supporting a medical examiner investigation, but there was some vacancy in that, and that's created the growth. And it's always good to have contingency going forward. So that's the reason for that. So overall, this is, a very straightforward budget at 11% growth, current service level, and 4% after you've taken account for the vacancy factor. Categorically, again, not basically no changes. I think that's the easiest way to put it. Categorically, they're spending the dollars the same way. There's some small adjustments in terms of particular areas, but again, nothing specifically in terms of that I would point out. 30 FTE is what is in the district attorney's office budget. Those are the permanent positions that are budgeted both at CSL as well as proposed. In terms of the funds, there is about three different funds, fund types, I should say, from a governmental standpoint. We have the general fund. 84% of that comes out. Again, as I've said before, when I talk to you about the general fund, I will give you the discretionary versus the dedicated. 85% of his general fund dollars is discretionary, whereas 15% is more dedicated as it relates to some specific fees around discovery and criminal diversion fees. state criminal fines and assessments, as well as the federal VOCA operating grants and other governmental service payments. So about 15% of the general fund portion is related to that, but the bulk of it is specifically discretionary dollars. The DA does have 12% of his budget covered with local option levy, which is the unrestricted dollars. And then finally, there's a small portion of our trust funds. Again, these are dedicated dollars, and I'll let the district attorney and staff speak more specifically to those purposes. But as with trust funds, these are dollars given to us that are specifically for those purposes and only those purposes. And again, I'll let the district attorney talk more about that in his comments. Finally, functionally, again, these are the areas that the district attorney will be covering in his remarks as he goes through his various divisions. Again, this is a pretty straightforward budget, 11% increases. There's not anything that jumps out to me again in terms of any major changes. Some of these numbers are relatively small, so again, it doesn't take much for a percentage shift going forward. So outside of that, I'm going to turn it over to DA Haraldson and let him give you a department overview and talk specifically to his divisions.
Thank you very much. Benton County Budget Committee, Chair Wright, Vice Chair Nancy Wise, and the entire committee want to acknowledge you and acknowledge the work that you are putting in across the county departments in considering how to manage the budget. I am proud to come before you for my 9th biennial budget. I have had really the honor to serve in a career that, from my perspective, is one of the greatest jobs in the world. And the thing that makes it special for me is that it is a job that has a purpose that is beyond the individual. And that purpose is the pursuit of justice through the truth. It is a nonpartisan position that is not defined by one political side or another, but is defined by the principles that are embedded in our mission statement and our rules of ethics and laws that we must stand by in order to carry out our duties as they are intended and as we are entrusted to do for the public. Now, my theme today for the budget is a theme of success. It's a theme of success with respect to stewardship and with respect to collaboration with the board in some of the most challenging circumstances that we've come to face, to show how this system works and how nimble we can respond to the challenges that have presented themselves. It's really for us to really recognize how this system works and our role in making sure that that's a success. Now, with that, I must say that what means the most to me in my job is not what I do individually, but that I walk a journey in the pursuit of justice through the truth with an incredible team. And that team includes all the employees of the Benton County DA's office, those people that we contract with, and those people who we work with and collaborate with in various agencies, the citizens of the community who serve on the juries, the witnesses, the victims that we work with, all folks that are touch points really for us in our experience. The reason that I wanted to mention this, of course, because sometimes we can become hyper-focused on what one person's responsibility is versus examining how we're all so interconnected in what we're able to accomplish. Now, at the top of that point, I would note that in 8 biennial budgets, now on our 9th, the district attorney's office has always stayed within its means. We have never surpassed our budget. I'm very proud of that, but the credit really goes to my administrative director. My administrative director, Renee Hamill, is a person who scrutinizes every dollar that's spent in our office, and not just scrutinizing it to see if it adds up, but to scrutinize it to see whether it meets the standard for prosecuting attorneys, our ethical standard, which is, I would submit, the highest standard that we operate within the county. I'm proud of the fact that I work alongside someone who's supporting us in making the decisions that need to be made about our fiscal management in a manner that would withstand the scrutiny of the public of being on the front page. And that is a consideration discussions that we have more times than I can ever count. And so I would be remiss if I did not express a recognition for the amount of work that Renee has put into it, but to also recognize her, she's somebody who really loves working with numbers. And I have a brother who's an accountant, and he had that same sort of things. They literally draw energy from it. It's a fantastic thing to see. And so I'm grateful every day to be able to have someone like Renee to be able to work as an administrative director and work through those issues with us. I mentioned the crisis and collaboration. One of the challenges that we can face is no matter how much we try to systematize our financial planning, there are unforeseen challenges that present themselves. And there are even some that we begin to see them coming, but we don't know what the full scope of that is going to be. And one of the great examples of that was the advent of body-worn cameras and how the body-worn cameras were and continue to produce evidence that had not been produced before. It is a good thing, but it requires time to review it, to process it, to manage it, to send it out as discovery. And as we have discussed over the years, what those demands are, and as we realized over the years, we began to see our office reach a critical state where we could not stay above water. And we were able to add a few positions, but in one critical point, the Benton County Board of Commissioners stepped forward, not during the budget cycle, but really in the middle of the biennium. And thanks to that collective action, we were successful in being able to make the transition into managing a historic, burgeoning increase of digital evidence, unlike anything we've ever seen before. So I will take this moment to acknowledge the appreciation and express the gratitude for the support that has made that possible. Now, I will speak at the end of the presentation about opportunities, and that ties into how we continue to grow in the reality that we now find ourselves in with regards to digital evidence and managing that data. I'd like to address the current state. We're not before you asking for additional positions. We're not before you with a policy package. And that is the manifestation of the investment that the county has made in the district attorney's office. But we have to keep in mind that the district attorney's office is not its own island. When we hear from the juvenile department with respect to the increase in their workload, when we hear from the juvenile department in terms of the increase in assaults, increase in various types of crimes, when we hear from the sheriff's office, when they speak of the increase in the number of callouts, imagine where all of those cases go. They go to the district attorney's office. And so you're going to see in our presentation what that data manifestation looks like and have an idea of the trends that we are seeing as well. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. Okay. This slide really defines what the general responsibility of the district attorney is. And you'll see that I've included a statutory reference. And in this budget cycle, I decided to include legal authority with respect to different revenue streams. But I also wanted to make sure that I touched briefly on the scope of what the district attorney does, because if we simply address revenue streams, we risk leaving the impression that the scope of work of the district attorney is less than it actually is. And to understand the full context of that, I do need to touch upon it briefly. I would note that the district attorney's office is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, that that be ever present in the work that we do, that we incorporate a lens, if you will, to ensure that we are an inclusive agency that is committed and to the theme of justice for all. Here's a quick summary of very, very general areas of responsibility for the district attorney's office. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail. I just really wanted to give you the opportunity to be able to see that it's a longer list than what people say in general might typically imagine a district attorney does, especially if it's somebody who's just used to watching TV shows that maybe depict, some district attorney type theme. It's far broader. And in fact, one of the points that I would just draw out of here is public records. Who thinks about district attorneys and public records? And who knows that the district attorney actually has a quasi judicial role, so that any public records requests that are denied, either by Oregon State University or any other governmental agencies within our jurisdiction, those go to the district attorney, the appeals do. And then the district attorney has to write a legal opinion on that. And if the request is denied, that opinion is submitted to the Attorney General, where those opinions are then collected for reference and for legal settings, standards. So that's just one example. I didn't include it in this slide, but I used a slide before that shows a bit of an algorithm of the life of a case going through the criminal justice system. And I saw Commissioner Ojero look up because I know you remember the slide. It is pretty complex in terms of all of the various options and all of the decision points. And within each one of those sort of blocks that are there, one would be trial. And if you think about the multitude of decisions that are made, it is a complex process. It is a very, very demanding process that is highly scrutinized in today's political climate. When we think about the juvenile department, when we're thinking about our law enforcement agencies, and we're thinking about the district attorney, the level of scrutiny has never been higher. Now, we don't shy away from that, but it certainly becomes a factor when it comes to hiring employees, hiring deputy district attorneys who are going to be facing that scrutiny. And if you are brand new, no matter how experienced your mentors are, that can be a little bit of a scary undertaking. And so our training, our investment into our attorneys is critical for this reason, to ensure that we're bringing the best and most diverse talent available to our office. Next slide. So here you can see a diagram that violates some of the PowerPoint rules, which is don't have the font to be too small. I think it's supposed to be 36 at the smallest on the font, and I can guarantee you that's a little bit smaller than that. But in a nutshell, it not only lists our FTE positions, but it also lists our contract positions. In total, we have about, I believe it's 36 individuals that are involved, or positions involved in being able to get our work done. Okay, so as I indicated, I would look for each of these revenue streams we're going to be addressing. One of the important things to keep in mind with the authority is not just authority, but it also goes to mandates. Now, each division in the county has very important work to do. Some actually have legal authority that sets out mandates that drives a lot of the work that they do. The district attorney's office is one of those. So criminal prosecution, I listed perhaps the most powerful authority is the Oregon Constitution. And of course, it's blocked out with a little screen there, but without that, you'd be able to see it. Nevertheless, the note that I would make with respect to this slide is that we did intake on 2,725 criminal cases involving 5,419 offenses in 2022. That is within the ambit of our initiative goal. And really here, the goal is to make sure that we made the investment. And again, about success, that as a county, we made the investment that allowed us to be able to meet that demand. Other point that I would note is that we responded to 23,440 scheduled court appearances. That's an increase from 2020 of, I believe, more than 4,000 scheduled court appearances. Now, scheduled court appearances occur when the court schedules a court appearance. Then we respond to that court appearance. How do we respond to it? Well, we have to assign someone to the case. We have to make sure that if there are pleadings to be filed, that they are done. We have to make sure that if there is a victim to be notified, that they are notified of the appearance. And so there's a lot that happens even before the appearance occurs. Now, with a historically high failure to appear rate, we keep having to do that as an office over and over again. So perhaps I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself when we talk about opportunities. Here's something to think about with respect to the passage of the levy. Hypothetically, I'll say if the levy passes, that we have an opportunity to be able to have an infrastructure in our justice system that would help reduce these costs. Because as you can see, if somebody doesn't appear for court, it's not simply a matter of the fact that they didn't appear for court. There is a human impact to the victim of the offense. And then there is a cost impact to all of those individuals in the process that work at getting that matter set up. Okay. And so one of the things that we examine here is what this means for us in terms of that preparatory work we're doing and how we respond to it. Again, we have been successful in this because of the investment that has been made in our budget. Victim assistance. Again, this is a mandate under the Oregon Constitution. This week we're celebrating Victims' Rights Week, and Commissioner Ogerow read the proclamation from the commissioners. Thank you very much for that. And we had an opportunity to hear from a victim who had been profoundly impacted. You can see from the numbers here, 40,911 services to 2,306 victims of crime. Now, those services can include going to court with the victim, sending out notices to the victim, getting information from the victim with regards to their losses, medical records, and so forth. The list goes on. There are multiple court appearances to make, whether it's the initial arraignments, whether it's grand jury, whether it is a motion or sentencing. So the numbers really count with regards to what the demands are. But those are constitutional mandates. And if we do not meet that constitutional mandate, there's actually a statute that provides for a legal action for the district attorney's office to be sued for failing to provide that service. We have never been sued. And I believe that's because we've never missed our mark with regards to providing those services. That is something that as a county, we should be proud of with respect to the fact that we are responding, we are active, and we're ensuring that we are serving the rights of victims in Benton County. With regard to this context, one of the points that I would make is this. I have been in an administrative position with Benton County for 21 years. And I'm proud to say that in that time, and certainly as district attorney, we have successfully prosecuted all of our homicide cases. Now, part of that is making sure that our law enforcement agencies have done a great job, and they do. Making sure that we are preparing those cases properly. Making sure that we're engaging in negotiations if that's an option, or litigating if that's necessary. But I'm proud of the work that our team has done and being able to get that kind of outcome. And perhaps one of the things I'm most proud about is that I believe that a district attorney's office should not be a stress for the community, but we should be a rock. And that the district attorney's office in Benton County has been a rock, continues to be a rock, and will continue to be a rock because of the investments that are made by this board. Next slide, please. Okay, Criminal Media Division. I spoke a little bit about this with respect to the this burgeoning workload that we're having to face with regards to body worn camera and grand jury recordation. These were in essence unfunded mandates for us where the counties had to bear the cost. And it's interesting how when these tools were being introduced, how they were minimized in their description. Oh, you can just record this and it's not going to be a big cost. The reality is that there is a significant cost, and I have been transparent with the budget committee about this now for a couple of cycles. And I think it's been helpful because now I can stand before you and we don't have to go back to square one. You've been along with us for this ride, and that's a very, very important part. But this is one area that I fully expect, just like IT, is just going to continue to grow. You remember, the bottom line is any time that you're recording, which is a good thing, you're producing evidence, and then that evidence has to be managed. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what some of those challenges and opportunities are in our last slide. Next slide, please. Death investigations. The district attorney is responsible for conducting death investigations. Law enforcement is responsible for conducting all other investigations. But by statute, the district attorney and the medical examiner are responsible for death investigations. And so it doesn't have to involve crime. If it's an unattended death, the district attorney has a responsibility to handle those cases. Not only that, but, and we don't hear a lot about this sort of on TV or in the public, the death investigation is a matter where the district attorney has to be able to prove certain elements: when the death occurred, who the decedent was, what was the cause of death, what was the manner of death. And so we have to prove all of those. And if we're unable to, then we have to go to an inquisition, which is like a trial in front of a judge. And then evidence is put forth there. The great news for our county is that the death investigators, which include both the medical examiners and our law enforcement personnel, conduct such great investigations that we have not had a need for an inquisition. Okay, even though that's the full scope of that process. And this is an important thing, because you can imagine how, if there's a suicide, and that's a very difficult thing sometimes for a family to accept, and they, may want to know that it wasn't foul play, that there wasn't some other reason, or even an accidental death that might, well, could it have been a foul play? That those are areas where, you're sometimes trying to prove a negative. And our law enforcement agencies do a fantastic job in this body of work. But it's a body of work that is very, very demanding, but we seldom hear a lot about, simply because it's kind of going on in the background. With respect, I'm sorry, one last point I was going to make to this. With respect to the death investigations, we contract for the services. We have a regional medical examiner, and then we have deputy medical examiners who have nursing type of backgrounds, as well as law enforcement medical examiners. Now, this has become more recently a critical area because the state medical examiner's office has had a crisis with regards to their staffing. And so they're no longer able to take on the workload and are pushing work out to the regions. And so fortunately, because once again, our investment, we've been in a position where we've been able to manage that. And I don't believe the same can be said for all DA's offices across the state. So again, I think we should be commended for that. Next slide, please. Child abuse investigation. This is one of our mandates and grants that I believe would fall under the scope of the general fund. But this is dedicated funding with respect to focus on investigation of child abuse cases. It's a multidisciplinary team, meaning all of the agencies are actively working on cases. It could be Department of Human Services, the Juvenile Department, Victim Services, or law enforcement agencies. So it really, anybody that's touching that investigation is actively working on that, and they're meeting on that every single week. And that is part of our mandate. Also, with that comes a protocol and a grant application that we have to apply for regularly, and that also pays for mandated training. And so we send our team out to get cutting edge child abuse training, which obviously is one of the greatest investments that we could make for some of the most vulnerable members of our community. Now, by statute, this exists by statute. There also exists an elder abuse MDT and a sexual assault response team MDT. However, those do not come with any funding. So I just sort of note that to you that we do have great bodies of work that are regularly meeting, actively working, that were created by statute but are not funded. Next time. Okay. Willamette Criminal Justice Council. Okay, so when we talk about Willamette Criminal Justice Council, now we're going to the area that Mr. Kreger referred to as our trust funds. And trust funds are funds that it's a little, I guess I would describe as a little bit of a pass through. And so the Willamette Criminal Justice Council, I put the statute up there for the local public safety commission, which is what is required for our county. And so that's the authority, but this is an important also multidisciplinary team aspect of our criminal justice system that brings together a broad of folks that have an interest in that system, from OSU to all of our cities and folks with an interest in our jurisdiction. Next slide, please. Victim impact panel is again another statutory construct that is required for folks that have been charged and had disposition on a DUI, and then they have it's part of the kind of the training, education, part of the process for folks to get a better understanding of how DUI has impacted the lives of people who have suffered great loss as a result of folks who are drinking and driving. Next slide, please. Animal Legal Defense Trust. The Benton County DA's office has served as the fiscal agent for Oregon's animal cruelty prosecutor. We have done that for 10 years. And again, it's a pass-through grant that comes from the Animal Legal Defense Fund. Then we manage the contract for the animal cruelty prosecutor. He's done a fantastic job for 10 years, prosecuting high-profile cases successfully across the state and in Benton County. And I know that there's great dependency on his work across the state. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. So our Thriving Communities Initiative, goal number 1 relates to our capacity to be able to provide 40,000 services to victims of crime each year, noting that just in the last few years, we've exceeded 40,000 twice. So the trends continue to increase with respect to services to victims, just as the number of victims, number of crimes continue to increase as well. Next slide, please. Our capacity to respond to the scheduled court appearances, you'll see here that we set the standard at 18,000, which is still a lot of court appearances. And I would sure like to be able to get closer to the 18,000 if we had the infrastructure to be able to manage our failure to appear rate in a better way than we do today. But that is, again, the standard that we've set for ourselves. Next, please. So I'm always a little bit uncomfortable with this slide, the way that it states our goal is to review 2,700 cases and 66,500 charges. I would say our goal is to have the capacity to review that many. We don't want that much crime to happen, but we want to have the capacity to be able to review that, because we know that as we look back at the trends, that is probably the minimum of what we're likely to see. Next slide, please. The next goal speaks to diversifying our workforce. One of the challenges that we can face as a community is having a desire to diversify our workforce with excellent employees, but not having people. That's a real challenge. And so the question that one has to ask is, what can we do about that? And I can share with you that I've already taken action, and I'm actively engaged in taking that action to be really proactive. Right now, we have a posting for a deputy district attorney, and the number of applications that we have received have been dismal. I took it upon myself to call all of the law schools in Oregon and the state of Washington and invite an opportunity for me to personally go to those law schools and get face time with the students to begin to try to build a in-person connection, not just a paper, to be able to take some action that perhaps other offices are not doing, so that perhaps a student may be able to have some FaceTime, ask some Q&A, and begin to actually visualize themselves being part of our office. I believe that's one of the strengths that we have, but people can't see it if they can't see it. And so that's my strategy today. Initially, I'm getting good responses from those schools, and I look forward to being able to get out and seeing if we can really impact, enrich our applicant pools, so that we're having a better opportunity to have a workforce that is going to be representative of the communities that we serve. Goal number 5. Develop a technological infrastructure to support media interface. This is a historic endeavor that is currently happening. I will describe it this way. Renee is constructing this system. Now, I am involved in that process, but Renee is really the point person in ensuring that how is this testing? How is it working with the interfaces with the law enforcement agencies? How close are we to be able to test and then go live? Now, this is incredibly exciting. This has everything to do with a body worn camera and review and how fast we can get that to our office. Can we get it off the cloud? Can our system download it fast enough for us to be able to watch it, or is it going to get bogged up? That's been a big challenge up to this point. But we're closer than we've ever been to be able to go live with that, but it has bugs that have to be worked out. Here's what's exciting about it is that this technology has the ability to allow our deputy DAs to watch up to, I believe, 3 or 4 videos at the same time. So they'll sync up. And if you have 3 officers at the scene at the same time, the time will sync up and you'll be able to watch 4 videos at the same time. Imagine the time savings versus watching 1 video at a time and then the next one and the next one. And over the course of the year, that is huge. So I'm very, very excited about that. I consider it to be truly historic. And I am excited having Renee be the point person on that, and we'll consider it an exceptional accomplishment. And we'll be come back to you to announce the news when we're ready to fully roll. So future challenges. I already spoke a little bit to the exponential increase of digital data evidence. That is both a challenge and an opportunity. And I've already addressed the opportunity that I believe exists to be able to work on that. But it also ties into the second, which is updating data management systems. Updating data management systems doesn't just involve the district attorney's office. It involves our law enforcement agencies. In other words, if you go harken back to the early years of my career, it was, I started prosecuting in a day where officers wrote their police reports by hand. It was not unusual for an officer to have evidence in their desk. And then, oh, I forgot, and here it is. The systems that law enforcement agencies use, in my view, have not kept up with the data technology and managing it. So one of the issues that we've seen come up is that we're all ready for trial. We've been told we have everything. And on the eve of trial, we hear from the law enforcement agency saying, oops, we've got 3 more cameras that you haven't seen yet. Well, all of a sudden now the case is continued because the defense didn't have it and so forth. And at some point, the courts reasonably get frustrated. Why can't you guys get this done? And so you can see how the domino effect impacts the work that we do, and it can actually impact the confidence that we strive for in terms of working in front of the courts and ensuring that the accused has all of the discovery that they're supposed to have. And so, again, we're very committed to that, but it's going to take more than just the DA's office having the systems that they need. And I'm hoping that our law enforcement agencies will be taking that into account in terms of their budget requests, because, it's going to cost something. Next on the challenges is staffing and space demands. And staffing and space demands are something that can be addressed with a new courthouse. And so, you know, I remain optimistic about that. And I think that these are exciting times. And I do look forward to seeing what our community chooses for its justice system. The challenges will continue as that growth continues. And we really have to continue to assess that as we, you know, go along. One of the things that I would note about staffing, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I didn't worry a little bit about the percentage that was in our office. I understand how that calculation was made, and I understand that it is actually less than the actual number that was calculated. But there's a part of me that worries that perhaps that was a unicorn. And if it was a unicorn, of course, I move forward with the confidence that I can come back and ask for additional funds to be able to make sure that those expenses are covered. Because at the end of the day, and at the risk of overusing sports analogies, this is my first one today, is that, you know, it's for a DA's office that has 12 deputy district attorneys. I sort of liken it like if you have a baseball team that's supposed to have 9 players, you can still play with 6 players, but you're not going to be very good. And so, you know, if we were, you know, like you know, say Los Angeles and had a office of, you know, nearly 1,000 lawyers, if you're down a few, you know, you're probably not going to feel the same impact that you would with the district attorney's office when you have smaller numbers. The great thing is that we've got a great team. They work well together. And, you know, the reality is that we've become accustomed to working long hours. And that's how we synergize. That's how we function. But my goal as the district attorney is to make sure that our positions are filled with the most talented and diverse team that we can possibly have. With regards to crime increases, I look at the trends as we've talked about, and you've already heard about from other departments as well. The concern over poverty and the impact that poverty has on crime rates, and then social conflict. Speaking to a lot of the tensions that drive hate crimes across the country, and how that can create tensions. You know, gun crimes, things of this nature that knock on wood, but have become an unfortunate daily reality across the country. So those are matters that we need to you know, certainly be aware of and ensure that we have the infrastructure to be able to respond. Opportunities, as the sheriff mentioned, Jason, is definitely a huge opportunity for us to be able to have an infrastructure that is truly based and defined by what the needs of our community is. And so, you know, that's the fascinating part about this. This is something that was just created by some thought that, oh, well, let's build a Taj Mahal. To the contrary, this is really an endeavor that has sought to create the most efficient workspace and most efficient infrastructure to allow us to be able to have a justice system that we can really be is really functional. And why does that mean so much to me? I didn't use the word efficient by accident, because by statute, the district attorney's workspace provided by the county, the standard for it is that it be sufficient to efficiently carry out the duties of the district attorney. And so I understand that resources can be limited, and sometimes that can create challenges. But the potential opportunity here is, again, historic. And I look forward to being able to continue to build upon those opportunities. The next opportunity I wanted to talk about was digital data management collaboration. And this is the continuing collaboration between us and our agencies, and even at the statewide level, to begin to recognize the costs associated with these type of changes. And, you know, again, I really appreciate the fact most of you have been with me along this ride where I've talked about how expensive this is going to be. And to some degree, I felt a little bit like I was the first person to talk about it. And now, we've become leaders in the state in being able to talk about how we're approaching this and what our commitment is to ensure that we are actually reviewing the video camera, the video that's produced by the cameras, because that's what we believe our community wants us to do. There's no point in recording if nobody's watching the store. The next point that I wanted to address is the note active salary studies. As I noted, I have been in an administrative position for 21 years. And I can tell you that in 21 years, the tool that has been used to respond to the challenges of salary compression have been salary studies. And the reality is that human resources is also going to be limited in terms of what they can do based upon the budget that they have. I would certainly be an advocate for human resources having sufficient resources to be able to have an active salary study program. And what I mean by an active salary study program is that historically, what we have seen is that we will wait until there's a problem. And then when there's a problem, we will seek a salary study. And the salary studies seem to take a long time. And by then, we've lost applicants, we've lost employees, and it becomes a huge challenge. For the district attorney's office, some of our recent employees that have gone to work in other places have left for salary increases of $50,000 plus. There was a time to kind of compare. This is a kind of an interesting thing this goes in the category of nobody saw this coming, okay, with regards to COVID and the shift in available employees and what that did. And did HR really have the resources to be able to take on what that challenge would be? I would argue they did not. This has been a huge shift with regards to the challenges of competing for employees across the board, not just in the district attorney's office. But what has happened is that with a reactive response and a slow response in that salary survey, we have missed the opportunity perhaps to be able to hold on to employees or to be able to attract employees. You'll recall the corporal listing was at 94,000. So an attorney who's gone to law school and gotten a Juris Doctorate degree and then takes the bar, passes the bar, if they come to work at Benton County, the starting salary is $80,000. Now, it used to be that when you compared starting salary at the AG's office and the DA's office, there was about a $30,000 difference. And we thought, wow, we can't compete with those guys. Now it's $100,000. We've seen counties that their deputy DAs have gotten wiped out by the AG's office because their salaries are so much higher. And those salary increases, we got to see salary increases in the AG's office happening during that period of time. So they were able to stay responsive. Now, am I saying that I think our salary should be at that level? No, I don't think that's realistic. But I think it's an important note with respect to what happens. How did we get to a place where we had salary compression? Okay. If we don't address that issue first, quick fixes are not going to resolve that issue. And I would submit that if we had a dynamic, active salary study that would allow us to stay ahead of the curve, then we would move away from the model where we're waiting until there's a problem and then coming back and trying to do a salary study, but being stretched so thin that we can't get that turned around very quickly. Community collaboration. One of the greatest examples of community collaboration is what we've seen with respect to our engagement with the community regarding the needs for the Justice Improvement Project. We have seen engagement that has included surveys. We've seen engagement that involves community meetings. It gives us that opportunity to be able to share information, whether we're going out to the fairgrounds or wherever that might be, to be able to share that information so that our community can be informed. One of the biggest challenges that we have today is that there is so much competing information for people's attention, whether it's through social media or otherwise, that it makes it a little bit more challenging for us to be able to share that pertinent information with our community. But that is an area that we have to, again, be proactive in and to be able to make a commitment to do so. And perhaps the best way for us to do that is to partner up as we have, to be able to make ourselves available to the community and to engage the community so that the community is really, we're all in this one and the same, really. We are part of that community too. And so that is truly an exciting opportunity for us. So all of that to say, great reason to be proud of our success. We recognize that there are challenges and there will be funding demands that present themselves. But at the end of the day, the success of our government is really the result of the decisions that you have made and will continue to make. And for that, we express our appreciation.
Wanting to fill, but because I know that's been a challenge most of the time that I've been in office, but maybe speak to your current situation.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Malone. We have one vacancy in the district attorney's office for deputy district attorney for the lawyer position at this time. We lost an attorney for a higher paying job. But one of the other issues that came into play is that this is stressful work. And what was communicated to me was that the individual just wanted to get out of criminal law altogether. And so that resulted in that change. Excellent lawyer. One of the reasons that I perhaps react with an expression of fondness in my facial expression is that I'm proud to say that we have the healthiest office that I have experienced in my entire career. And I chalk that up to a lot of work that both Renee and I have done with respect to really emphasizing the importance of emotional intelligence when we do our recruiting and when we do our hiring. And that has really brought together a team that shares their strengths, both in their intellect, in their capacity, their emotional intelligence, and how that translates to their interpersonal communication, both within the office and outside the office. So it makes it that place where you look forward to come to work every day. So we're committed to invest in that standard. And that's why the recruitment piece is so important to us, to make sure that we're getting enough applicants to be able to not compromise that standard.
Thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner Wise?
So could we go back to the digital management collaboration piece? I know you spoke to it a little bit. I'm just trying to clarify for my own understanding. So are you or are you not at the place where currently the evidence can be uploaded and like sent and accessed? Because I know that was a goal, I think, at some point, or a hope. Can you speak to that, please?
Absolutely. Our original plan was to have our case management system, which is state of the art, be able to manage all of this. And they had a partnership with evidence.com, which is the video management system that our major law enforcement agencies use. And so with that partnership, the video would be able to come straight into our case management system. What we have learned in testing is that there are functions that are lost in that process. And there is also speed that is lost in that process. And there are also functions that are challenging with regards to discovery, getting that turned around then to the defense. and how that's going to be set up, the link system, how the charging and so forth. All of that to say is that we are now looking at a model that would incorporate having to use two systems in order to make this work. That would be both PBK and evidence.com. It's a little bit clunkier than what I had wished for, but that's what we're testing to see which one of those is going to service the best.
So what steps need to happen, or what needs to happen to move down that road? Or are you just, you're currently investigating it and seeing if it's worthwhile?
We're actually currently testing it with our law enforcement agencies to test different size files to see how fast can we get those, and then try basically going through the motions. We have a pilot system already, and so we're already running cases through it now, and then identifying where the challenges are so that we can then have the service provider correct those for us to get us to where we can fully turn the lights on.
So assuming that all of that goes well, what resources would be needed to implement it fully? Is it an additional cost, or?
There are costs associated with this that we plan to ask for from the law enforcement agencies that have the greatest demand, and they have been great partners in that effort. I will defer to Renee to address some of those cost issues and maybe even address a little bit in terms of where we are with regards to testing.
I can speak to testing first. We've been testing several different avenues. I have one of the major challenges we have been facing is how do we deliver that digital media to defense as discovery without us taking on the work of burning that to CD or thumb drive. Like, we don't have the infrastructure to be able to take on the burning, because it takes down your system. And so there's a different module that we'll start testing next week, which is a direct interface for defense attorneys. So we would send a link to them. They would be able to access it more directly than us providing it in a different way. So
I would also add to that we are communicating with jurisdictions that have been using the same systems. And to some degree, it can be validating in a negative way when they're facing the same issues. But at least we know that there isn't something out there that's already been solved that we've overlooked.
So the cost share portion, right, would you be looking at costs in this biennium? And is that currently in your budget?
it is not in our budget.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question, I was unclear. Did you make a policy package request for HR? Or were you just
That was theoretical.
Okay. Thank you.
But I certainly support the idea if it exists.
Okay, thank you.
Back to whether or not we have an allotment for that in our budget. My hope is that most of the expenditures will be borne by the law enforcement agencies because we are actually taking work that they're currently doing. So that seemed fair to me.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Ms. Irish.
In your community outreach, are you doing any kind of expungement clinics or work with the public in order to help some individuals who are being burdened with very old convictions that may be able to get on with their life? Have you worked with any of the community members to do that?
There have been some continuing changes with regards to expungements, which have not simplified the process. So with regards to having discussions with partners, certainly we have those discussions. But one of the challenges that we face sometimes is going out and putting ourselves in a position where we would be giving legal advice to someone who we may have prosecuted. And so there are some restrictions with respect to that. But I will say this, I have been a vocal advocate of publicizing the opportunity to expunge. I think that's probably because it's existed forever, but it's been one of the best kept secrets. And for what? At the end of the day, if you meet the statutory requirements, you're entitled. It's not a discretionary process where the DA says, well, I don't like that person, they can't do it. It's literally a process where if you meet those requirements, you get the expungement. And so that's where we are on it. But it is an area that I do think it's important to to be transparent about. And I can tell you that we also do get calls about that from the community, where we're able to refer people to the online resources to get the expungement package from the court.
There's probably some local attorneys that would be happy to help facilitate that, right? So you're not dealing with the people that you prosecuted. And I know that Benton Community College has some programs where they're trying to help individuals get on with their lives, and they're unable to get rentals, they're unable to get jobs regardless of the work that they do. It seems to be, as simple as it is, a really big obstacle for some people, even though that process is outlined. Maybe it's intimidating. Maybe the couple $100 it costs is too big of a burden. So I would just hope that at some point there could be a coordinated effort that we could do that for those folks. And then I had another question. I forgot what it was. I apologize. If I think of it, I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
I will follow up with you, though, that I know that the Oregon State Bar has tried to set up some sort of community awareness available in libraries in their communities and so forth to be able to these issues as well. So, obviously those are important windows of opportunity for folks to not feel like they have to come into the courthouse. Sometimes that can be a little bit daunting too.
I think it's something that could really help a lot of individuals, though. Keep them out of poverty, maybe keep them from recommitting. So anyway, I think it's a great idea.
Any more questions? No. Thank you, Mr. Helser.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on.
20 minutes until the end of this with a 30-minute presentation ahead of us. So I guess I will just look to the committee as a carryover appropriate, or how do you want to proceed with this?
Let's finish it.
Overtime. 30%.
Okay, let's get going. So with that, I'll invite Ms. Martineau up with me. We don't have to so it's close to me. We don't want to. So, we can route it up here. Okay, well, thanks. Appreciate all of your patience here to as we got through all the presentations, some really good information I think has been provided by both the the sheriff's office as well as the district attorney. So we are on our third presentation for today, which is our human resources department, and Tracy Martineau is here with me. And again, this is I know we have spoken to in terms of the legal counsel, but legal counsel is relatively small. This is the first group of the family of internal services. You'll hear from my department as well as IT on our last days of presentation. But with our schedule, we needed to sort of slide in one other department. So Tracy she drew the short straw. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump right in. So I'm going to just again give you a quick overview of the Human Resources Department budget. In total, I have little Jenna Ambio glasses on here. So we are at a current service level budget of $3.5 million. This is 22% above the adopted level. So this is a little on the high end, but I will talk a little bit why that is here shortly. The recommended budget increase is $630,000 from the current service level, and that includes 3 FTE that is being added to, which are current limited durations. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And this brings her total proposed budget to 4.2 million, which is approximately 44% above the current budget. She does have a vacancy factor, pretty small. So the 6-year history, again, as a reminder, all of you, these are all based on 6 years of history. Tracy's has been relatively small at 1.1%, so about $41,000. Again, her primary budget drivers are related to all the other things you've heard from departments, in addition to 3 FTE, which is provided to really help the workload components of human resources. In terms of just from a growth standpoint, what I would point out to you is that the big number that you see there, contingency of 499%. Now, I will say there will likely be a technical adjustment, but remember in budgeting, we're looking at everything, all expenditures plus contingency. We've seen a pretty significant growth in both our employee assistance revenues, as I shouldn't say within our balances, as well as our wellness. And again, that's essentially COVID. And so we've been in situations over the last 2 to 3 years where people have been working remotely and those balances have grown. You will hear from Tracy. I mean, there are some active plans being put in place to address those. At some point, we may want to also reevaluate in terms of where we're at in terms of payroll charges and perhaps back that off a little bit depending on sort of what we come up with going forward. So again, I just really want to point out from Tracy's standpoint, the 22% growth, while a little on the high end, it's mostly driven by the contingency piece. If you look at her personal services category, 17%, again, not a lot higher in terms of what we've seen as average, and then very, very low in terms of the materials and supplies at 2%. And then, of course, her total growth, which we get up to 44%, that's driven by her policy packages. And again, she will speak to those, which include three positions. So categorically, again, in terms of the differences that you're seeing, the 2% contingency moving up to 8%. So again, that's the element of a larger balance that has accrued. That little green slice that you see there getting much bigger in terms of the proposed budget. So that's really the primary difference that we're seeing. 8 FTE. So this is, and I say this a lot, and and I work very closely with a lot of human resources departments over the years. I've worked very closely with Tracy, not only now but in the past, and this is a pretty lean HR team. And I'm just going to put it on the record. I mean, what they do is amazing, but with nearly 600 employees and a team of 8, and asking for 3 more, even at 11. That's a pretty lean team. And I know Suzanne, hopefully she's back there shaking her head as well, because I know both of her and I have seen a lot of different HR shops. She has a lot more experience directly in the HR world. And I think we both really agree that, wherever we can have some opportunities to really help support our HR team, I think we need to do that. And as we all know, it's harder than ever in terms of hiring and recruiting, and we can't do that without the great professionals of HR. So that's my little soapbox there for a little bit. I will move into the revenue sources. So again, these are internal service funds mostly. So this is your first, getting out a little bit with legal counsel, but this is your first exposure to internal service funds. So these are essentially funds that are in place that comes through our central cost allocation for our management service fund. So essentially all the departments within the county are basically, there's a expense, and those expenses they collect into the management service fund, and that's how we pay specifically. I, in my former life, called it indirect rates, but this is in the county world, internal service funds that are used through a central cost allocation. I do want to point out, and again, we'll talk a little bit about this, another transfer that will be into the management service fund is about $246,000 that will come from our health department. Again, a lot of recognition in health department and seeing the needs for HR, and they are making a contribution in one of their policy packages towards that. The employee benefits trust fund, that's about 11.64. These all dollars are come through payroll charges that we have. And so again, I mentioned the employee assistance program, as well as the employee recognition program is another area in which and wellness. I should also say that are all collections that are through the payroll charges. which accumulate to certain levels. And I do mention that I do think we are going to need to make a supplemental adjustment in this budget because our estimates for one of our estimates for our employee assistance program, where we want to try to stay at 40,000 lives. I think we forecasted a little high. So again, we will make sure the charges are set appropriately, but I think the way we forecast it may be a little bit high. So that's more to come. Just wanted to point that out. Trust fund dollars, a pretty small piece of dedicated resources paid by other governmental organizations, and I'll let Tracy talk a little bit about how those dollars are used. So lastly, just a quick functional overview. The only thing I will say in terms of these areas, the two large percentages, see again, element of contingency. So these are the two areas I already mentioned, wellness, both employee assistance program. The growth is the contingency growth that you see in each of those. So with that, that was really fast. I will turn it to Tracy to do some department overview.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity for me to be here and speak with you a little bit about the HR department and our business needs going forward into the next biennium. This slide gives you an overview of the functions of the Human Resources Department. Recruitment, selection, obviously, labor and employee relations. When we talk about labor, we're really talking about interactions with our employee organizations such as AFSCME, BCDSA, and ONA. That isn't just limited to contract negotiations. That also involves handling grievances and disputes, as well as labor management activities. I won't read through the rest of the bills. So I think you can do that for yourself. We have added some resources behind HR information systems in this last biennium. And we are continuing to expand on our use of those resources. So very grateful again for the support that we've received previously to bring some more modern technology into HR. It helps us to be more efficient and do more with less. So we'll go ahead and go to the next one. So Rick mentioned the 3 additional FTE that we're requesting. The 2 limited duration positions that were approved, I believe within the last year, are that recruitment specialist position you see in the lower left and the executive assistant that's on the upper right. That's currently not the classification that where we're using that position, but this is where the need is for the new position. And then the HR analyst for employee relations and system support would be a completely new position. And all of these positions are being requested as permanent. So these are, I think this slide really outlines the functions of HR that are under this budget heading. And again, I won't belabor it by reading through the list of bullet points. I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the forces that are in play when a little further along in our presentation when we get to the goals and the policy option packages, provide you with a little bit more directly connected information. Some of the things that we did over the last biennium is we added the BSP vision care option to medical benefits. So now employees have a choice of 2 vision plans. It was extremely well received. We saw a lot of movement over to the BSP plan. So really excited that that value proposition. Joe Missler, our HR analyst, is the one who really did the legwork on that and the research on that. Saw the need that we needed to provide, an additional benefit at what amounted to be an even lower cost than our current than the current benefit at the time. So that I'm very proud of that move. We're seeing a continued shift from our PPO plan to the high deductible plan. At some point, this is not going to be feasible due to low enrollment. Our numbers today are 395 employees on the high deductible plan and 63 employees on our PPO plan. And so as you can see, that number is decreasing over time, and there will be a point which our medical insurance carrier is no longer going to be willing to take that on. So heads up on that one. we offered a very much expanded employee vaccination clinic during COVID. In the past, we'd offered flu vaccinations from time to time. This time, we really hit it hard, included the COVID vaccinations early when they first became available. As we started to roll our Benton County employees through those clinics, we invited the city of Corvallis to also participate. That was at no cost to the county. We ran them through their own insurance. But I think it was a great benefit and appreciated by the city of Corvallis that we collaborated in that way. We continue to have a pretty high participation rate in our Ignite Wellness platform. That's the platform that our employees use to track their activities. So it interfaces with a variety of smartwatches and activity trackers. That participation has pretty much held steady over the last biennium. So I'm pretty good. I feel pretty good about that considering COVID and coming off COVID. We're expecting, well, we're actually in the course of ramping up our in-person activities as I speak right now.
And Tracy, if I might just add in back to in terms of the employee wellness, I mentioned earlier that a lot of this budget here is an accumulation of contingency. And again, while, during the COVID time, you had some of that built up, I would also say that this is an opportunity for us as well. When we think about just the difficulty and challenges in terms of employee retention and employee recruitment, I think there's an opportunity for us to really look at our employee wellness program and see, okay, while we've had some of those additional dollars that have accumulated, what are some of the unique things that we can put in place as an employer? I think, how do we think outside the box, right? How do we make sure that we do everything we can to bring people to Benton County? So again, I just want to put that plug in as, while I know there is accumulation of contingency, it is, I think, presents an opportunity for us.
Thank you. So just a reminder that our wellness program is based on 8 pillars of wellness, which is at the core of our employee wellness philosophy. I would, something that's not always immediately obvious is that we take the data from our claims utilization and pharmaceutical utilization. And that reveals certain disease characteristics or illness characteristics in our employee population. We take that data and that informs our wellness activities. So when you see that, among our top 5 chronic diseases are things like obesity and high blood pressure and diabetes, we gear our wellness offerings as well as our wellness incentives behind activities that will support well-being in those disease categories. So we're continuing to do that work as well. When you see our wellness roadmap or our plans for the future, I just ask you to bear that in mind. That's something that we are pretty proud of. We think it's had a very positive effect. We're in a really good place in terms of our claims utilization over the last several years. Our plans running very, very well at this time. So I would like to think that some of that is in part due to the connection between our wellness activities and our health plan. So see, these are some of the benefits that are offered through our employee assistance plan vendor. Our vendor is Canopy. They also provide us with counselors for after crisis debriefs and as well as health and wellness related training or such as vicarious trauma, self-care. They also do our reasonable suspicion training. That's the training that managers and supervisors receive to be able to identify drug and alcohol use in the workplace. Actually, we are scheduling 2 trainings that will be coming up in late May and June that are related to employee well-being, handling stress, managing stress, both in the workplace and at home. I think we've all, heard a lot about the level of burnout that we're experiencing personally and professionally in a variety of workplaces right now. And we are trying to address and support that for our employees. One of our other programs is the Rewards and Recognition Committee. And this is a committee that puts on these activities and it is staffed by employees for employees. And so this is the same group that has been in place for several years now. and are very committed to their colleagues and recognizing their colleagues, and I'd just like to give them a special shout out. Should we go ahead?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so that brings us to our first goal. This is digitizing and electronically managing records has been a multi-year goal for us. You could probably imagine we generate a lot of paper, or in the past, we generated a lot of paper. And so there's a lot of activity related to the conversion of former paper records to electronic records. Unfortunately, we haven't had a fantastic solution to do that. And so we have had to address it project by project. We have an HR IT finance work group that works on several projects on an ongoing basis, because as you can imagine, some of this work touches all three of these departments. And we collaborate on this project work, and I think this has helped to digitize some of the work in all of our departments. And IT has been a great contributor and advocate for us in making sure that some of that happens. The technology takes time to implement, as you know, we saw with the Office 365. There are many benefits available that will advance this work in using Teams. We're looking at a Munis Cloud migration later this year, which we're got our fingers crossed that that also is going to help us advance some of this work. Okay. Our second goal has to do with investing in our employees. And this is the design, development, and continued phase-in implementation of a structured employee development program for job enrichment and to promote county career planning. The concept behind this one for the next biennium is the development of something called individual development plans. You may be familiar with that concept based on other organizations that you've worked with. But in general, it's at the performance evaluation period and the goal setting for the next performance review cycle. There will be plans for employee development that can be identified. So those are things like and conversations with the employee might include, you know, what is your next step career-wise with the county, or what would be job enrichment opportunities for you. And that could include things like training, job shadowing. It might be work out of class opportunities. It might be job rotations, things of that nature. But it gives employees a chance to bring to their supervisor's attention what their goals are in a way that makes it manageable and meaningful for them, and actionable as well. There's an accountability piece to this too. It's also a more strategic approach, more planful than just waiting for the opportunities to arise and then taking advantage of those opportunities. And I'd also like to emphasize that, you know, we talk a lot about engagement, employee engagement here at Benton County. And this goal directly ties to two of the Q12 engagement elements that are very important to us. The number one engagement element being, I know what is expected of me at work. And that is something that we didn't receive as high a score as we would have liked countywide. And so we are paying a lot of attention to it. And again, connecting our goals strategically to improving some of these elements. The other element is in the last 6 months, someone at work has talked to me about my progress. And this was another area where there's some opportunity for us to improve those scores. So by systemizing this in a way that that conversation is captured in our perform system, and that it's a planful conversation, that we hope that this will, you know, improve our employee engagement and build capacity in our workforce internally. So Rick, I don't know if you want to talk.
No, sure. So I'll do kind of a quick overview in terms of human resources policy package request. So again, a little less than $631,000 is what's recommended increase from the current service level budget, including 3 FTE. So Tracy had actually presented, or I should say there were a total of 2 policy packages presented, and they totaled $948,000. One of those packages I should mention, and I mentioned earlier, was actually came from the health department. $246,000 for one position. You'll hear more about this in the health department, but one of the things that they were able to successfully negotiate in behavioral health was an increase to our capitation rates. And part of that negotiation allows for workforce expansion for mental health workers. And one of the things, again, kudos to Damian Sands, who recognized, okay, well, that's great, but we can't do that without good HR professionals and recruitment. So one of the things that he did actually build in with those resources was a FTE. So that's where that is coming from. Obviously, going forward, that would be something that would carry into our central cost allocation. But for this binding, it would be secured with those particular resources. The rest of the package that was requested are all from central cost allocation. That's the 702,000. Based on our review, the county administrator recommended the one package from health department as full approval, and then a partial approval for the other. And we'll talk about those here shortly. So in total, that equaled 672,000. And when you applied the vacancy factor, the $41,000, that's how we come up with the $631,000 increase. In total, that's an increase of 22% to the current service level budget. So back to the beginning, 22% CSL increase, and then a total of 44% in terms of proposed. So that's sort of a summary of the packages. Now, in terms of the first, and Tracy and I will kind of both probably jump in on this, but just to summarize what was requested in the human resource capacity package, there was a request for 3 FTE as well as a reclassification of an existing FTE. Tracy mentioned earlier, 2 of those FTE are current limited durations in this budget and are being requested to be permanent. The third position was a position specifically for supporting the coordination of training activities, and actually ties directly to the goal that Tracy was just speaking to. We did not recommend approval of all of the positions. And again, this is an element of just looking at all resources and trying to be thoughtful. And again, I'll let Tracy speak to the one position, but clearly the 2 limited duration position to maintain existing capacity was a huge priority. Definitely wanted to be able to see those continued, and the reclass, I would say, goes with that as well, because that's positioning Tracy better to be able to serve within her existing staff. The training and coordination, again, there's no doubt, as I always say, I wished I had all the money in the world and we could approve everything that was requested. But from the standpoint of priority, first, let's address the current workload and then determine, are there other ways in which we can address training and coordination. I'll turn it over to my colleague to maybe add and expand on that a little bit as it relates to the training piece.
You did a really thorough job on that one, sorry. But basically that is kind of the behind the scenes conversation with Joe Kirby happened over a year ago about the need for a trainer, and you know, Joe was very invested in a learning organization and providing training. But as our organization expanded, not just in numbers, but in needs, it became clear we needed more flexibility than what a specialized position like a trainer would offer. And so we had to kind of pivot, and that resulted in the request for an HR analyst versus a trainer position. We'll be doing our best to spread those support for training across our analysts, the current analysts, hopefully including the positions that we've requested, and we'll address meeting training needs in that way.
And if I might just try to channel my inner Joe Kirby here a little bit, if he were here, he would, and I know that this was, you know, of course, he was a big advocate for this particular position and need, but again, he recognized we just, you know, unfortunately, minimal resources, we can't do everything. So let's first make sure that we bolster our current capacity. And then as we go into the next binding, and as Suzanne always likes to say, I think she does a good job of saying, it's like, it's not like we want to say, no, this isn't any good. It's just, it's know that we don't have enough resources to be able to do it, but perhaps as we move through the binding, maybe there are other opportunities where we can revisit these things. So that's true for everything that we talk about here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I've pretty much already covered it. This is the second package that again came through initially through Health Department and rolled into Human Resources. Tracy and I worked together. I think initially it was a little bit lower level than we wanted. We wanted to make sure that she had a high enough level to be able to have that direct support. So this particular position again comes in to really shore up the capacity of being a good, having good business partners and having an HR professional that all the departments can go to and be able to help you. But again, I will defer to Tracy to talk a little bit about that need.
I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about what some of the drivers are behind HR workload. Recruitment and talent acquisition demand is a huge driver. In the last 2 years, we've had the highest number of position vacancies, and departments have also added staff. A couple of examples here. The average total vacancies in 2022 is 91. Yes. And that is a huge number. That if you think about that as a percentage of our total workforce. I'm not a finance
It's
expert.
almost, it's about a fifth.
We're currently at 85 vacancies for year to date. And today we have 26 active recruitments. I already talked about the increase in the number of employees in the county organization, but there's also been an increase in, because of the workforce shortages, we find that we have lowered minimum qualifications in some areas. We have reallocated positions to lower levels that would allow for training classifications. We've done this with our medical assistants and with our some of our positions over in public works. And that has been I think a great strategic move in collaboration with those departments where we have been able to kind of grow our own in that way. But where we have situations with inexperienced supervisors, they require much greater HR support than someone walking in the door with a full skill set of managerial and supervisory experience. And that is also a big driver on our workload. Adding these positions that we've requested is going to enable us to keep pace with the growth countywide. It will also enable us to continue to build on the employee engagement work that HR initiated in 2019 by using the Gallup Q12 survey and the engagement model. We will be bringing in additional training and resources for supervisors on how to lead teams from a strengths perspective. Really excited about this. We'll be talking about this internally at our next leadership team meeting. But again, that goes to our advancing the concept of employee engagement. It's been mentioned here by other departments today that we have a management and confidential employee compensation study that's underway. And so that's another big project that we're engaged in currently that will probably spill over a little bit into the next biennium. We are also in the process of updating our personnel policies, and we're finally gaining some momentum there. Policy Oversight Committee is back in HR after a period over in the county administrator's office. And we have started rolling policies through for approval once again. So hoping to keep that momentum up as well. We're also in the process of helping departments to develop emergency action plans for every county facility. We have one in draft form for Calapooya. Several of the health clinics also have their action plans in place. And we're looking forward to completing that work for the rest of the county as well. And I think we're ready. So you've heard about this, as I said, from other departments today. I noticed that, one of our challenges that relate to being able to fill our positions do include inflation and housing shortages. There's a workforce shortage also across so many different industries and occupations right now, more than what we've seen, at least in my history in HR. We have talked from time to time about funding a compensation philosophy of leading the market. And you heard this from both the sheriff and the DA, that matching the market may not be enough for a variety of reasons that we can provide you with more information in the future. But that if we take a position of leading the market, that will help address some of those issues that they were both speaking about. Maintaining internal pay equity. This is now a state law in Oregon, and so something that also takes time to continuously evaluate. Anytime we make an exception, we have to review where our current employees sit and if we need to make any adjustments. The county administrator vacancy we're actively recruiting for now. And then contract negotiations with both AFSCME in 2023 and ONA in 2025. You'll notice those are listed under both a challenge and an opportunity, and I don't think that will be a surprise. I mentioned previously that we do have opportunities with our supervisor training program, continuing to use and develop our NeoGov Learn system. We've been rolling that out to the departments over the last biennium. I think the health department has now, all of their training is now included in the system. Other departments are also implemented some of their specific training, as well as, just remind you, there's a huge catalog of training that is available for our employees and for our managers in that learning management system. We already talked about, oh, excuse me, I almost skipped new manager orientation program. This is something that'll be rolling out over the next month or two. This will be an orientation for new managers that is specific to their needs. It's basically how do I find what I need to know immediately? So in terms of, things like from approving employee time to what are the important policies? What do I do with the collective bargaining agreement? And most importantly, when to call HR. Individual development plans is something we're really excited about. We think employees will be really excited about that also. I don't think I have anything more to add to that from what I previously relayed. And then I do want to talk a little bit about attracting and retaining talent. I mean, that's just such a big subject right now. So just a couple of data points, right now CPIU is at 5% and it's cooled slightly, but I don't think anybody's projecting that there's going to be a rapid cool down of inflation. Our employment cost index, which is the price of market, price of the labor market, is at 5.1% as of December of 2022. It's the new index will be published tomorrow. We're expecting that to come in at around 4-something%. So this is important because we have adjusted our salary ranges by the ECI. So we're looking at another big number, which is, I would say, an historically large number for the second year in a row when it comes to ECI and adjusting our ranges. You've heard a lot about the organizational development plans that we have in place. A lot of it is targeted for building capacity in our workforce, as well as being able to, really create an environment that our employees want to be in. It's not all about compensation, it's about culture. And the value proposition for employees is changing. People are expecting more from their bosses, they're expecting more from their workplaces. And that's real. It's a need that we have to acknowledge and respond to. And so activities such as fully implementing our employee engagement program, our Clifton Strengths, that is a great accompaniment to that, will be really important. And I think it's also a component that we can use in marketing our Benton County culture. I have this image in my mind of being able to promote not just our compensation and our benefits that we offer, but also this is the kind of workplace you want to be in, because we're invested in your engagement. We're invested in your work experience, and we have programs in place that will help you grow your career here at Benton County. This isn't just an aspirational value. We've put our money where our mouth is, and we've built systems and put systems in place that will help you. I think that's it.
I've been aware of some of the efforts to lower minimum qualifications and to figure out how to in essence, broaden the pool for some of our positions. And I had not thought about it in the context of doing so for positions that are supervisory. And I can see how that would put an extra strain on the HR department. If you're bringing in new people that have never had much record of supervising others. And one of the things I was wondering about is whether we could use or whether we do use any kind of a peer mentorship program for people in a supervisory role, pairing new people with someone that has a similar experience, perhaps in a different department, but to help take some of the load off of HR department, but to hopefully provide good lessons rather than bad habits to new employees.
It's been a subject of conversation for, I would say, for years. And I would love to implement a peer program, a mentor program, such as that one. I think one of the challenges that I don't have listed on here that we're facing, and it's not just an HR challenge, it's time.
Yeah.
It's, you know, our supervisors and managers are just stretched so thin that I don't know what the answer is to ensure that they have the time to be able to sharpen the saw, as well as to, you know, engage in some of these activities that really are culture shaping activity or for mentoring. I would be happy to bring that kind of a program into play, but it would require us finding some way to create time for managers and supervisors and put those resources in place.
That's where you need that additional position for training. Yeah. Yeah, without slacking the system, it's really hard to do.
Maybe just to comment in terms of the time piece, I think, you know, one of my observations is, as a newer member of the county is how do we as departments, and I think you heard a lot of this from Darren Nichols as well, how do we as departments really build our succession within our various structures? So I'll just use my own department as an example. As we've gone through the centralization, one of the things that Debbie and I recognize is that we, you know, you can get directors, but you've got to also have supervisors and operations folks. And so we built in a, you know, within our existing budget, built in a position that would be more of that operational supervisors, because what you end up having in a lot of cases, directors that are doing a lot of these additional type things, and that's where the time issue really comes in. So I think that's probably an element within a lot of our departments. But one thing that I've really seen a lot, and I know Darren, in talking to him, that's really what a lot of his original policy package 1 was about, was trying to build that infrastructure so that he isn't doing 3 different manager jobs.
Yes, yeah, and have too much of a span of control and very difficult time getting any work done.
And you know, I think that's part of our culture too. I mean, we hire people who are very service oriented. And I think we have you know, when you see your department heads that are sitting here in front of you asking for budget authority for positions, they're typically not asking as much for supervisory and managerial positions. They're trying to put the positions, you know, at the operational line. And that's at their own, at their sacrifice, that they're picking up that other work.
Commissioner Malone?
Yeah, I guess in the 4+ years I've been here, seemed like the first year, 2019, was kind of calm in retrospect. But COVID and probably other factors that caused turnover and the vacancy factor is significant, and I know has put a lot of pressure on your department, and appreciate you hanging in there and you know, trying to figure out how to go forward. That it I don't know if unprecedented situation is accurate, but I think it's pretty close, and just trying to figure out how to navigate and keep the wheels on, and let alone we have more staff now than we did a few years ago, and that increases your workload, so I think this seems like a reasonable request to try to scale up to meet the demands of what we're dealing with.
And really fortunate to have a team that is inspired by the people they support.
Well, that shows.
If I could add something, Suzanne Hoffman, Interim County Administrator, I just wanted to echo something that Rick had alluded to and really compliment Tracy and the HR team. I do have a fair amount of human resources experience in my background, and I have been continually impressed in my time here at the amazing team that Tracy has built and continues to build. Excuse me, incredibly responsive and customer focused staff who really care about the mission and very, very diverse lines of business that are within the county organization. I also received some feedback recently. I mean, aside from being, I think, a consummate HR professional from a technical perspective and an ethical perspective, and just from a knowledge base, a recently hired, very talented manager who needed to speak with Tracy personally about a challenging situation at work, reached out to me to tell me that in her career, she has encountered a lot of HR professionals and HR directors, and felt that she had never encountered an HR director like Tracy, who she described as incredibly human-centered and empathetic. So I think that we are incredibly fortunate to have Tracy and team. And I think whether we're talking about HR or IT or facilities or any other part of the infrastructure, as we continue to grow our programmatic areas, we need to remember, as behavioral health did this time around, that at a point, you've got to be sure you're growing your infrastructure to support all those programmatic services so that they can continue to happen in a quality way. So pleased to support the behavioral health effort to add an additional HR person to ensure that they can have the horsepower they need to fill those important behavioral health vacancies that are coming our way. And finally, I would just say that there are so many good reasons to want to be an employee of Benton County. So it is no small compliment from me to say that one of the primary reasons that I came to Benton County, that I extended my time here twice, is because of the person sitting next to me right here. So I really appreciated Tracy's support and leadership and thought partnership throughout my time here.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Presentation.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple housekeeping things. One, just to follow up on a question that Commissioner Malone asked from the district attorney's office about vacancies in terms of, because I know that clearly is a larger vacancy rate in relation to that. Currently, what we have is 4 vacancies that we have is listed. They may be actually in negotiation 1 right now. So again, we want to look at this very closely to see kind of where we always at with vacancies in terms of the vacancy factor. That'll be something we manage. So just wanted to make sure that I followed up with you on that particular piece. As it relates in the theme of questions, I would like to make a proposal to the committee. I know last time we talked a little bit about if there are follow-up questions of any of the departments here, is the committee member free to ask? I would make a suggestion that maybe if there are questions that aren't answered here, that those route through me, and then I could go to the department director, gather that information and bring it back to you to share, so that all 5, 6 of you will have that information and the public will see it too, and that we were being transparent to the both public as well as to all the committee members. And then clearly, if that isn't a good enough answer, we could always bring that department head back during deliberations and actually, does that sound like a reasonable way to approach that? So as you, I think Liz, you said earlier, hey, I think I might have a question for the district attorney. You could forward that question to me. I could go out and grab that and get that information. And if I needed to pull you in to at least get more clarification on what the question was, I could certainly do that.
Sure, for the record, I'm meeting with Sean Meyer after this for a little clarity on the 2040 Thriving Communities Initiative, because it's not something I'm familiar with. Do I need to route that through you as well, or can I go ahead and?
No, I think if it's information gathering, not as it's related to a specific budgetary question in terms of the proposal, I think that's perfectly fine. I'll look to the rest of my maybe more experienced colleagues.
My question that precipitated some of this was very specific to about policy option packages and a director's preference among their proposed policy option packages. And that's the kind of thing that we really need to either ask in person or through Rick so that all of that information comes back to us and is consistent to all of us. But just that background information helps.
Okay, good. And then another question, are we going to have through this process, since this is my first time through this process, an opportunity to revisit a lot of this? Is that worked into the timeframe?
Yeah, so our last 2 days, so we scheduled 8. Our last 2 days is complete, but we will have public hearing one more time with the public. And then once that closes, we will move into deliberations. And if we need a second day, we will use that as well. But there are 2 3-hour blocks if necessary. So it just depends on the committee in terms of, how far they want to go. We could go 1 meeting, we can go 2, if you prefer. And we can also at that time, if we needed to, I could have department heads on hand to be able to answer, maybe any questions that might come up during that time.
And maybe what we could do is at some point, either you can solicit from us or we can just in a public setting, let you know where we have more questions and where the discussion points might be. So that before that, the first set of deliberations, which departments are the ones that be subject to.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Roche. That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Previously at the end. Previously at the end of each meeting, I don't know if commissioners, when you participated, you remembered, we would take your requests at that time and call it our parking lot list so that we could come back to you within hopefully the next meeting and open the meeting with the answers to that. So that way we know what directions you want some clarity and guidance on.
Yeah, and this policy option package approach is just significantly enough different that I think it's thrown us a little bit off of our stride. But I think that I have a running list of where I would like to make possible adjustments or have questions. And at some point, we just need to get those all on the table.
Yeah,
I would appreciate sooner rather than later if you could send those to Rick, just so I can then start working on them, because I would prefer to get you the information as soon as possible.
Yeah, I would suggest, just pose your questions or anything that you have as it comes up to myself and Lindsay, and we both will collect those. And again, we can follow back. My intent would be to follow back in writing. So it's part of not only, to be able to give to the public record as well. So.
The questions come to you, but then the questions and the answers go back to
the full committee,
everybody in their part of public record.
Yeah, I could certainly, I was thinking in terms of the spirit of time, be able to put that in writing for you so that you have that at the next meeting. That's the way I would approach it, because again, as you can see with these meetings, we've taken up the entire time. I think a little bit difference from the last time is that you had, I think, as according to Jen, a lot of extra time at the end. So these last 2 meetings, obviously we've run over. I take that, as a good thing, because you're getting lots of information and you're having good questions, hopefully being answered here as well. But we can, again, take a stop and say, okay, is there, do we want to dive into some questions?
So I guess I have a couple things I would like to say. I like that approach. If one of us has a question, maybe more of us have a question. So I think that's good it's good to do that. I just want to clarify the reason that I brought this up in the first place was in sort of I want our budget committee members to feel supported and to feel confident and to feel like, you know, if they need more information on some of the background, you know, and they don't want to ask that question in a meeting and take up a bunch of time or feel like it's a silly question maybe, or they just want to kind of get into the weeds more than what we would typically do in a meeting. That was my goal for, you know, bringing that up. So I just want to continue to be reassuring. I know in past experiences that I've had between the city of Corvallis and here, one thing that we hear from community members is, oh, you guys just rubber stamp the budget. So I would like the public to know and feel confident in the budget committee members that we have all had the chance to talk and learn and, you know, feel confident in our decisions. And not come across like we are, you know, telling someone that they can't take the time to find out the information. And I feel like as a commissioner, as somebody, I reserve the right, I feel like to speak directly to those that I feel I need to speak to. If I need to call the sheriff or the DA, I personally am going to do that. So if there's, I will share whatever information that I get, but I don't feel that I need to share all those conversations in writing, if that makes sense. But I'm happy to share the outcome.
Anything else? I do want to thank you for, and I actually meant to do it earlier, thank you for these smaller nameplates. So we short people can actually see a little bit.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
So, Mr. Chairman, we're up next Monday. So that's our next hearing, and in front of us will be a big agenda, health department and the community health centers. And I think, as I pointed out to you in the opening day, the health centers budget is going to be a little bit different budget in that we're looking at some different both a combination of budget reductions as well as a revenue package that Carla will be presenting to you. So that will be a big meeting.
Are there any members of the public here or online that have any comments or questions for us? No, we had that on the agenda, and so I want to make sure we made that opportunity available. Nobody?
Sorry.
Okay. All right, with that, it's 4:33. We'll adjourn the meeting. Mr. Malone, if you'll pass me your gavel.
Give it your best shot.